One of the things you don't worry about being downrange is Americans are Americans. We're all fighting the same cause. We're fighting on the same team. So I have 2 CIA assets in the room with me. I didn't know that at the time. One was with the Colombian Intelligence Service. This went right up to the top, and this was essentially a great way to really hurt Donald Trump. And back then, I don't want to say the Trump administration because you can't. The Trump administration back then was so fragmented between the people who were working against Donald Trump, like the Gina Haspels and the Bill Barrs and the Mike Pompeos and Elliot Abrams and all of these individuals. And Elliot Abrams, if you read my discovery, it is a who's who of the State Department at the highest levels. It is mind-blowing. Well, fast forward, a year and a half, when everything happens in the Operation Sabotage, Elliot Abrams goes in front of the Senate subcommittee hearing and basically says, "No, we just learned about this. We had no idea."
All interviewers have their own style, and my style is to try to get to the point and to be intensely curious. And the key to interviewing is listening.
Take a look behind the curtain with a real whistleblower and American patriot. Prepare to embrace the uncomfortable truth because this program has no time for comforting lies. Here is civil liberties enthusiast, Second Amendment defender, and recovering FBI agent Kyle Seraphin.
Well, hello, my friends. Welcome to our Sunday sit down. I think today's is going to be exceptionally interesting and definitely unusual. We're going to be telling you the story, or allowing actually the man himself to tell you the story. It's the story of Jordan Goudreau, a former Green Beret, owner of a mercenary company known as Silver Corp. Wild stuff. I do have friends who are Green Berets. They don't know what they think about this story. Some of them have said it sounds fantastical and doesn't sound true to them. I'll let you be the judge, because that's kind of what we're going to do here. No caveat, just letting you know there may be some contrasting opinion. I'm going to let the guy tell his story in his own way. What we've always found is that there's different versions, and then there's somewhere in the middle is the truth. We're going to try to uncover it. I hope you guys enjoy getting there. At the end of the day, it's a wild ride. It's a wild story. It's a good storyteller too. So as I found with many Green Berets, interesting guys from all walks of life, and you guys will get a kick out of that one. Before we get started with that, let's pivot over to our friends at MyPatriot Supply, who get us ready and can remind you that even though disaster can strike at any time, the worst time to prepare is after it's already been done, after the aftermath of some sort of chaotic event. It's too late by then. Smart Americans have been trusting MyPatriot Supply to help them prepare before a crisis comes, and right now they're making it easier than ever. You can order the 4-week emergency food kit, and you're going to get 4 free 72-hour food kits along with your order. You can toss those into a vehicle, in a go bag, something like that. That's 2 weeks of bonus foods at no additional cost. These kits offer you 2,000 calories per day of delicious calories, easy to prepare meals, lasting over 25 years as long as you store them correctly. That is a real peace of mind. That's something that you can't put off to the last minute. You don't have to worry about last minute panic. No empty store shelves. Just know that you're covered, that you're squared away, that your family is stocked up before any disaster happens, and you want to make sure you get this before the deal disappears, because when emergencies hit, food is the first thing to go. Go to preparelikekyle.com. Again, it's preparelikekyle.com. Claim your kit plus 12 additional days of free food. Preparelikekyle.com. My friends at MyPatriot Supply, check them out. We're going to ease into today's story. I think you guys are going to have a good time with it, so let's do that now. All right, I'm sitting here, I'm laughing and smiling already because we already started talking. We were going to bro out too much. So we're going to enjoy a fun conversation. This is Jordan Goudreau. He is a former Green Beret and a man who found himself in the news cycle in a way that nobody wants to when you're a special operator. Legal issues, and I'm deliberately ignorant about your situation, Jordan. So we're going to just we're going to get into who you are as a person, why the hell you're in the news. Give people like the high tips, maybe like what's the news headline that they would have read that had your name in it?
Crazy mercenary tries to assassinate Maduro. That's pretty good.
That's right. That sounds about right. Now you lured me into talking to you about this, which I would do anyway, but you lured in by saying essentially that people were terrified of telling your story. What's the story with that?
Yeah, because so there's 2 pieces. There's 2 sides of this, right? You've got, let's make it simple. You've got the white hats, the good guys, and then you have the black hats, the bad guys. And it's taken me about 4 years to kind of piece through who's who and who did what. And it's taken a lot of discovery. Maybe part of the blessing of like being indicted and all that stuff is now I have access to discovery and I can see what they've been, what the, the bad guys are seeing. And so it's been real helpful. And so ultimately, I was recruited by an organization. We'll call them the White Hats because these guys, for the American side, they had good intentions, right? The global governments. These guys, obviously back then the geopolitics of it was President Trump was trying to figure out Venezuela. He didn't trust anybody in the CIA. They didn't trust him. The CIA was working against him. Gina Haspel, Bill Barr, you had, Mike Pompeo, Elliot Abrams, a lot of people working against President Trump. And so he's trying to figure out a solution, trying to avoid all these State Department landmines. And so I was recruited to do this thing. I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know anything about Venezuela. I didn't really care. I was more than happy doing stuff that I was doing. I was successful in other areas. And I was starting a company to do school shootings and try to solve the school shooting problem. So I get pulled into a meeting by the White House operations chief, which is a lifelong friend of President Trump, Keith Schiller, pulls me in, and next thing I know, everybody's talking about, military options in Venezuela. I'm like, okay, guess that's why I'm here, right?
Okay, I'm going to put a pause on. Let's put a pause on the story because let's get some background on you first, because that sounds like a hell of a way to find yourself. Tell me where you grew up. You got a French sounding last name, but you're not a French guy. Where are you from?
So I was born in Toronto. I'm Canadian. I was French Canadian. I'm not French Canadian. And
Okay.
my defense and the defense of all French Canadians, we comprise probably the 70th percentile of maybe the 90th percent of all the best athletes in Canada. Just saying, Rocket Richard. But anyway,
So we have that commonality.
Oh,
My father's side, French Canadian stock. So hard men,
yes,
loggers, woodsmen, things like that. They came out of Canada, went to Wisconsin. So, all right, you get a pass on that already. I thought you were going to say Louisiana for some reason. So
yeah, I mean, my great grandfather was a bootlegger in New Brunswick. So he was. I mean, and they make movies about guys like this.
My grandfather was a bootlegger in Wisconsin.
Oh wow.
And he was born in the 1890s, so probably about the same era as your great grandfather, because we've got that generational jump in mind.
Maybe they did some work together. You never know.
Maybe so.
But in terms of, so I grew up, moved to Calgary, Canada, and went to the Canadian Army for a while. I was in the infantry when I was 17. Went to college for computers. Back then, it was a big deal. You remember it was right before the dot-com bubble and all of that. And, did very well. Was on the dean's list and I guess honor, whatever it was. I think, I did very well in school. I had scholarships and whatnot. And then I went to work for my, I guess you could say my cousin, who was the drug czar under Ronald Reagan, a guy named Ian McDonald.
Okay.
And I streamlined his system for as long as it took me to get my green card. I think it was 6 months. His company sponsored me. Back then, with that degree, you could write your own ticket. It was a big deal.
Was it like an MIS degree or something?
Yeah. It's a computer science degree.
Okay.
So, I decided to, instead of making the big money, I wanted to go into I always wanted to go into the Army. I was always going to go into either some special operations unit or something. It was always what I was going to do. And so, that went right into the Army. I think I enlisted in Torrance, California, and did my basic training, which was pretty simple. I went through Canadian Army basic training, which is really tough. So by the time I hit U.S. basic training, hit the ground running, and I had a paratrooper contract. So I went right to 82nd Airborne Division, which that place, man, those dudes are serious dudes. Like some of the scariest training I've ever done is midnight mass attacks, man. And some of the guys who are affiliated with that unit, even the World War II guys, their stories are unbelievable. But it's very much a regimented organization of shock troops that are incredible at what they do. Bottom line.
Explain to people what a mass attack is so they can understand what you're talking about.
Oh, wow. Okay. A midnight mass attack is when you have, 18 C-130s in the air, 18 aircraft with 80 dudes in there sweating, vomiting, kitted out, guns, bombs, everything. And you're just doing a training jump. This is a training jump. These guys have been jocking up for, 10 hours, start at 3 a.m. and then you go through the whole day and then you do one event, which is the mass air parachute landing. It is absolutely insanity. I mean, you've probably seen YouTube videos of dudes jumping out of the backs of, C-130s, and that doesn't do it justice, man. When you do it at night, you don't have night vision. Like in special operations, we have night vision. So you have a much higher elevation. You're at, 12,000 AGL, 10,000 AGL, whatever, if you're on O2 in a halo jump. But when you're doing just a static line jump, you can see people walking around on the ground, man. And at nighttime, you can see the lights. Like you can, the thing that saves you with a halo jump is, I don't think your mind quite understands it doesn't understand the gravity, I guess you could say, because you're so high up, you can't.
It doesn't look real from that.
It looks like Google Maps. And so when you jump out and, your interval is 1 second and you're going and you're going and you're going, you're going to dance on people's silk, man. Guys are going to hit each other. Guys are going to be screaming. It is mass chaos in the air. And then when you hit the ground, hopefully you have a good landing. Then you have to throw on your night vision and you got to figure out where your people are. And typically, like in World War II, you've heard this term, the rule of the Algovs, the little groups of paratroopers who would just run around and cause havoc and do, because you can't find your parent unit or whatever. So this is where I started as a paratrooper, and I felt cheated because I wanted a Ranger contract, but as a I wasn't a citizen yet, so I couldn't get a Ranger contract. So I was in the 82nd for 6 months. They levied me to Alaska, which was another airborne infantry battalion. This was much smaller. And so we call it the Hunting and Fishing Brigade. So same kind of training, only you're doing this in the winter, right? It's like the Arctic. And so when you land, it's a little softer. I was there. I went to Ranger school from there, which was kind of strange because typically guys who go from there aren't in the 82nd is one of those marquee units. Like it is a fundamental cornerstone unit of the United States Army. 501st Airborne Infantry, I love it there. I loved it, my time there, but it's really there to kind of safeguard the pipeline. I mean, it's one of those units that probably isn't going to see a lot of combat if, a war would ever kick off, which one did. And then they actually did go and deploy to Afghanistan. But I went to Ranger school from there, and I went to the Q course from there, Green Beret selection from there. Yeah. Selected. Ranger school was absolutely, I didn't know what to think of Ranger school. Like you don't know what to think of this stuff. So when you go to Ranger school from 82nd Airborne, you have a train up, right? Like you have guys teaching you everything you need to know, and you need to know. As you know, Kyle, if you go to a school, an Army school or a military school, and you don't know the curriculum ahead of time, you're probably going to fail, right?
Yeah, it's like walking somewhere without a map.
Yeah, like you're done. And so I went to.
How old were you when you were going through this?
Wow, I was pretty young still. Early 20s when I did all this. So I graduated college. I was a young dude. I rushed through it. And then, so I'm a young dude, Ranger school, but I had the benefit of having Canadian Army and, 501st, but I didn't have the cheat sheet, man. Like it was like going through West Virginia selection. I didn't have the cheat sheet. All the Rangers have the cheat sheet. So anyway, going through Ranger school, and it's tough, man. And I really had to buckle down because I didn't, some dude from 501st says, here you go, read this book. I was like, sure, whatever, I'll figure it out when I get there. Yeah, I figured it out all right. I mean,
did you have any recycles going through Ranger School?
I did. I was Vaughn's, man. I had to. We would recite the Vaughn's Creed. I was a first phase recycle, so that's where I learned. Right. So I studied. I knew everything. But by the end of that, like I peered incredibly high because I knew it and I studied it. And the land nav part, really focused on it. I was good at it. So guys would make me their team leaders and whatnot. And then at the end, I think the final, you do your, whatever it is, your Santa Rosa Island operation. And I was platoon sergeant, and I had a pretty easy gig, man. I just went and made a deal for some boats. And then, you have the changeover of leadership. Well, the other guys, they got annihilated, but I got my go. So
tell people, because you said, I don't want to speak in code for folks that don't know this culture, but you talked about peering. Talk about the peering process and what that looks like in Ranger School. And obviously it has something to do with what you did later on too.
Right. So the peer process is, it's controversial, but if you are, if you're value added, you're going to peer high typically.
This is a peer evaluation. So we're not speaking beyond people that haven't heard this.
Right. And so if you have, and I can't remember the size of the teams in Ranger School. Let's say you had, I don't know, I think let's say you have an 8-man squad. Squads. There were squads. Mm-hmm. You have a 10-man, 8-man squad. Everybody has to evaluate everybody else, but it's not on a 1 to 10. It is it's on the curve, man. Like it's one spot. So there's only one person who's going to be a 1 and on your report. And then you'll have 1 through 8. And even if everybody in the squad is stellar, somebody has to be on that bottom edge, which I don't really, I don't agree with. I had some tremendous squads in Ranger School. I did chase I think he was like a first lieutenant probably first lieutenant around campfire once with a saw, trying to make him carry it. But, for the most part, guys get along and until they don't, and then guys will fight over food and whatnot. But Ranger School is wild, man. And I don't want to bore you with Ranger School stories. I think
no, that's fair. There's just there's a kind of a folk myth, maybe. Is it true that you cannot spell the word lost without LT? Is that accurate?
That's accurate. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. It's useful. It's useful knowledge. Some people know, some people don't. If you know, you know.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. So, I thought, by and large, I know everybody has their opinions in Ranger School and whatnot, but I thought it was a tremendous tool for leadership. I think it's only a leadership school. You really figure out who you are and how you can try to lead people who are hungry and tired and pissed off. And so it's tough. You work through the problem sets, and then obviously if you either pass or you don't, but it's a brutal school. Anyway, came back from that, and then I started training up for a Best Ranger competition with my partner, who is just a freak in nature. I mean, he's a beast. A dude named Rob Musto. And what happened is the Afghan war kicks off. And so no Best Ranger competition that year. So I was in perfect, physical condition to go to Green Beret selection. So I did it. Mm-hmm. And that was that, I got through that. That was, I had a little harder. I had a harder time than in Green Beret selection than West Virginia, simply because.
Right. Okay. And you've alluded to that. So we'll get to that in just a sec. What do you think, what was the biggest challenge going into that, coming out of a background with infantry and maybe going through Ranger School and then turning around and going to Special Forces? Because I often hear that it's not a 1-to-1 pipeline.
No, it's so the emphasis on land navigation, and there is an emphasis on land navigation in Ranger School, to be sure, but there's more emphasis on land navigation in Green Beret selection, and then there's a team week, which was that was tough, man. Like I'm gonna lie, like I am an average sized white boy, and I'm in shape. Like I'm pretty beastly. Even back then, I was pretty tough dude. But man, when you're putting contraptions on a guy with like my frame, and it's like 700 pounds, and guys are like they're quitting. and they're big dudes. And then, all of a sudden I'm carrying, we're all sharing more of a load. It got tough. I don't know if our group made it, but it was like, oh my God, I didn't know what was going on, man. I felt like I was heat catting out. A lot of the other guys were heat catting out. I was just going and going and going. Dudes were dropping, and it was brutal, man. And I can't.
So for people to understand the apparatus you're talking about, like Team Week is solving problems as a team, right? And I know this from reading things like Chosen Soldier. You may not be able to say as much, but I've seen stuff on Discovery Channel, so I can talk about what they've done. But they'll basically give you a Jeep that has you have to move the Jeep and all the things in it, but it doesn't have any gas and the transmission is locked up, and so you got to figure out how to move the whole damn Jeep and all the pieces of it, or something to that effect. Like you're moving a machine of some kind without the way that machine moves. Maybe some flat tires and maybe it'll just roll. So a bunch of guys pushing and carrying the load physically. Yeah, is that accurate?
Absolutely. You've got these pipes and you've got these rudimentary instruments to try to, create a frame so that you put like a ton of heavy stuff on this frame. And then the guys who, if you have you start with a bigger team, you'll have 12 dudes. But the longer you go, the more miles you rack up, guys will quit or guys will get hurt. And so you only have a smaller set of guys who are carrying this load. So it just gets increasingly harder and harder on you physically. Yeah, it's a crusher for sure, man. It's brutal. So I finished that. So I've never really talked about my background. It's kind of strange. Anyways, so I go back and I'm successful, and I am in. You go through SWIC, you go through the Q course, and you go through. I did. I screwed up. I should have sandbagged that damn GT thing because they put me in the 18 Delta course. So I really wanted to get to the fight. The war was on. I really was desperate to get to Iraq, Afghanistan, whatever. But I had to do this beast of a school.
Tell them what the Delta course is. So for folks that are not privy to the background, maybe explain the delineations in an ODA if you don't mind, so people have a better understanding. There's a lot of people I think that don't know what a Green Beret is and what that means once you start talking about it.
So Green Beret is wow. Okay, so Green Beret is full spectrum war. Is a guy who understands the entire life cycle of a military or special operation, from all the way fine, fix, finish. So we have an intelligence component. Every team, on what they call a white side ODA, which in my opinion is probably the Coup. And just full disclosure, I spent the least amount of time on a white side ODA, but I would say that a white side ODA is probably the most devastating self-contained unit that the United States Special Operations has, simply because it is the only element that does full spectrum war. Full spectrum war is essentially a find, fix, finish. This is the life cycle of any offensive operation. So you have to find the enemy, you have to fix the enemy to keep where he's at and keep eyes on him, and then you have to finish the enemy. Finish, obviously, either let's be nice about it, say kill capture or capture kill. Let's go there. And so Green Berets, what their whole thing is each one of them has a specialty. Truly, we cross-train. So you have weapon specialists, and you have commo specialists, medical specialists, and you have
Intel and engineering.
Intel, engineering, source handlers. So you've the four marquee occupations though are the weapons, the commo, the demo, and the medics. But you're right. Like what sets an ODA apart is really that intelligence component. Typically, you'll have a Fox. An 18 Fox is your intel guy. He'll tie in all components. Your SIGINT, your HUMINT, your STABINT. Can I swear at all or no?
Yeah, knock yourself out. You're communicating amongst friends.
We call it STABINT, HUMINT, FUCINT, whatever it is. Whatever int you're using to drive an operation.
That sounds right.
We got it all. And so then you have a guy who is your human intelligence guy. He's the guy who's going to drive a lot of the ops. He is basically the equivalent of a CIA case officer, but he's on that ODA. And so he's going in and around, the Indage, and he's really driving ops. And so this is This is what makes a 12-man ODA really special, is you can throw them anywhere. Look at, for instance, let's look at the very beginning of the Afghan war. You had Triple Nickel and another team, and these guys. So these guys are hardcore dudes. These guys were my mentors. I started in 5th Group. I'll tell you a story about my team sergeant later. But so they went in, and it took them 6 weeks. Linked up with the Northern Alliance, they had access to air CCTs, and so they did a whole campaign.
That was Calvin Markham.
Yeah, sure was. Call for fire, and so that's the other thing. The great thing about SOF and ODAs is we're receptive to our attachments. So if we have a strike force, a joint strike force, we'll have EOD special operations, which is Navy, and we'll have Air Force CCT, which is Air Force, because these guys are the best at it. We don't try to cross train outside of our scope and our bread and butter, which is unconventional warfare for white side ODA. And so obviously, 5th Group, they crushed it in Afghanistan. They won Afghanistan in 6 weeks. Obviously, we had JSOC elements down south with 160th, but that was the hard red line, and that's when the generals, I think, at that point said, well, some of the big Army and big Marine and bigger units wanted a piece of the action, and so they came in, and we were there for 18 years, but we probably could have left them.
That's such a dark way of looking at it, but that's not the first time I've heard that from somebody. Can you flesh that out, that idea that the war was won almost when it started?
Yeah, we won that war in 6 weeks. So we stayed, I understand the thinking of it, but maybe the decision-making model to stay, maybe that risk assessment was there and it was valid back 6 weeks after. Hey, we need to pull some guys in. We need to really go after these terrorist camps. We have to work by, with, and through the Afghanis. We have to have a SOFA status agreement, which we never had a SOFA status agreement in Afghanistan. We had one in Iraq. So our role in Afghanistan was far more nebulous than it was in Iraq. Our ROEs would change more. I'm sure, in Iraq, they were pretty steadfast. We had a very, very strict SOFA status agreement with the Iraqi government. But Afghanistan became a big playground. And so once the contractors started moving in, then the big money was moving in. And then we saw this whole, I don't want to get into this, but certainly other people, they can talk through it better than I can, but it seemed to be one big money laundering scheme with these huge corporations like Raytheon and General Dynamics coming in and having a piece of the pie. And we built these great big bases with Samsonite and Taco Bell, and that's just not that is. I don't know that the original, and I don't know that met the original intent of Afghanistan. That said, I don't know if the president at the time knew what his intent was in Afghanistan, and I don't know what would constitute. And certainly later on, I think my last deployment to Afghanistan was in 2015. Once you have military generals talk about, have nebulous targets like, well, how do you define victory in Afghanistan? At the strategic level, they should be razor sharp, razor focused. This is how we define victory. This is how we define defeat. These benchmarks have to be clearly defined before we go into a conflict, and it should have been done back then. It wasn't. It seemed more like an expeditionary war than anything else early on, and then it turned into an 18-year, let's just keep deploying, which, hey, listen, it's great for the force because it allows us to train and keep our teeth sharp. And it allowed the U.S. military to become the most devastating modern warfare force on the planet. And even today, outside the advent of miniature drone strikes and utilizing drones at the tactical level in the battlefield, which I think the Russians and Ukrainians have over us now, I think our ability to utilize CAS and ISR, SIGINT, and all the different facets of what we did without going too deep into the secret areas, because I'll keep that separate.
Yep.
Nobody can combine it into a synergistic spearhead the way that the United States United States Special Operations can. Nobody can. Not yet.
In the last couple of weeks, we've been seeing these uncovered, dollar amounts from NGOs and U.S. aid and things that are spread all over the world. I've talked to some other prior Green Berets or retired, that have a different instinct on U.S. aid than what we're hearing in the conservative media space. Do you have an instinct, you just talked about money laundering for 18 years, and I think a lot of Americans are probably hip to that, or to some degree. Can you reflect on the kind of the Doge / where America's money goes thoughts?
Absolutely. Here's the reality, right? So for the last 4 years, we've had an intelligence community that has been anti-America. And let me just say it like that. Anti-President Trump. Let's go after this guy. Let's use anything we can. Let's put confidential informants from the FBI in order to hem up the J6ers. Let's go after, these homegrown terrorists, I guess, if you will. So when you look at that, you have to view U.S. aid in the light of the CIA, because it is an intelligence program or project, right? USAID is used to create messaging, to create propaganda, to create avenues where international media corporations can spin whatever news that the CIA wants. Let's be very specific about this. This is a CIA project. And so depending who's in charge of the CIA, obviously Gina Haspel at the time, is going to determine the rhetoric and largely the news cycles in, let's take South America, for instance, or internationally. This is a problem if you have an intelligence agency that is working against a sitting president like President Trump. You would hope that an intelligence agency would be apolitical, and this is what it needs to be. And an intelligence agency, every three-letter agency needs to be apolitical. It needs to put America, I don't want to use rhetoric, it needs to put Americans first. It needs to be in place to protect Americans. It needs to be in place, whatever, if we're trying to, if the president is pushing at the national strategic, the Monroe Doctrine, for instance, Monroe Doctrine we've been using this for decades, then the CIA has to support that president, period. That did not happen.
Is there a way that these three-letter agencies can do that, though? Because you talked earlier about defining at the strategic level, win, loss, victory, defeat, et cetera. Isn't there kind of a moral judgment that goes along with that too? And so then if you're picking outcomes, then you're also sort of picking the route to the outcome?
Absolutely. But again, it comes down to, are these intelligence agencies, who are they working for? Are they are they autonomous? Are they a part of the United States government, or are they autonomously co-opting the government to bring about their own political agenda at the highest level, at the leadership? So when you ask me, are they able to affect that? Absolutely. Simply because when you're a sitting president, you expect that the person you put over these entities is going to do their jobs, and they want the best for America. So let's go to the Monroe Doctrine. Let's put America first, right? Let's talk America first. Monroe Doctrine, basically what it says is, we don't want anything in our side of the hemisphere. We don't want enemy countries or countries that are in our side of the hemisphere to be tampered with by, let's say, the Chinese. And that's the clear and present danger, right? Well, what happens when the CIA is essentially using messaging that is favorable to the Chinese in South America and is anti-American imperialism? And so you've heard the rhetoric. America just needs to leave everybody else alone. We don't want America to meddle in other elections. And yet the Chinese are meddling in elections in our, side of the sandbox in South America. And so what you would hope is that the CIA would actually counter that. But what we've seen over the last 4 years is they're not countering it. They're allowing it. And in a lot of cases, they're supporting it through programs like USAID, right? Or USAID. giving platforms like Politico or a lot of these other, mainstream media, international mainstream media, these huge budgets where they can really just push CIA messaging, and it's subtle. Look, Kyle, it's subtle, man. I'm not saying these guys are running around, with communist flags and trying to convince the population that communism is the best. But I think we can both agree that over the last 2 decades, South America is fundamentally changed on a social level. If you go to Mexico, or if you go to Colombia or Brazil, there is a very large component that is very woke. It's very leftist. And if you look at the BRICS nations and the infiltration from the BRICS into South America, well, Brazil is one of the card-carrying members. You have Argentina that's doing trade deals with China. You have Brazil obviously doing trade deals in mining, and there's a lot of mining rights from Argentina and Brazil that are owned by China. And obviously you have Venezuela, right? Venezuela is a white space for any naval force that would come into the region. So is Cuba. We've seen this like a couple months ago when you have submarines, Russian submarines refueling in Cuba and refueling in Venezuela. This is white space for the Chinese, which is, to be perfectly honest, this is our future enemy. And so and let me circle back, when you look at a program like USAID, it is, when it's used by a CIA that is not putting America first, let's just say, or putting some strange ideology, some strange globalist or leftist ideology first that is benefiting the Chinese, it puts America at a disadvantage. So obviously the implication now is that because, you'll have Tulsi Gabbard at the head intelligence spot, that we will have, she's going to clean house. That is the hope, right? That's what we're hoping.
Mm-hmm. We are indeed. Oh, we'll see. Tulsi's always one of those people that sits on my radar because I've watched her run for president not 5 years ago on the other party. She doesn't seem like she's interested in war, but at the same time, she's always had some, we've held some very different ideas in a very, very recent time span for a grown-up who's roughly my age.
I know that some of her ideas are controversial. I get that, but as well as I do, once you see things at the national strategic, and once you're able to have access to a certain level of information or more information, I think you change your idea of how to go about affecting the defense of the country. And so, for instance, would I argue that the proper amount of cooperation with South American countries by entities like the CIA could be beneficial? Absolutely. Has it been in the past? Sure. Has it been detrimental? Sure. It all depends on, what is the purpose? What is this clear defined? What is the goal? What is the clearly defined goal? And going back to Afghanistan, we never had a clearly defined goal. In Iraq, same kind of thing. So, yeah,
there is something to be said about being targeted by a government too that change your opinion. So I'm hopeful that that's the thing that has moved her, because she's seen some negative things, and obviously you have as well. So it kind of changes the way you look at your own country. Let's pick up at the Delta training you were going through to be a medic. You said you wanted to get into Iraq sooner than later. We left your Q course. I want to step back to it.
Okay, yeah. So Q course, man. Q course was. It's pretty awesome, man. Like, I'm gonna be honest. You do things that you don't expect to do. I never expected to be going first day of orientation to, I think it was St. Pete Hospital, like near in Tampa, and I did a chest tube. I used a trocar, and there was a guy who had a collapsed lung, and right off the bat, man, right in orientation, I had a suit on. One of the doctors comes up and he's like, "Who wants to do a chest tube?" I was like, "Yeah, man, I'll do it. Let's go." Ended up punching this guy, punched through his, second intercostal space midclavicular, and just boof, whoosh. And I was like, wow, this is crazy. And so you do rotations. Some guys were in Tampa. I was in St. Pete. And so you see a lot, right? So like you'll go in this, and it's up to you and it's up to your instructors. So you'll do some ride-alongs with the Tampa Fire Rescue. I was lucky enough to go ride along with those guys. Those guys were awesome. But in the hospital, you'll go in the OR and you'll actually assist on operations, and you'll learn how to do a lot of procedures you see in the battlefield, but you're actually hands-on doing it. And so a lot of instances, you'll hear guys say this, like you'll end up pushing residents out of the way to do procedures on patients simply because, not because we're better, our hands-on skills are much better at that point in their careers. I guess their clinical knowledge is far better because they do so much school, but our hands-on, we've already done. By the time you go to rotations in Tampa or wherever it is, you've done hundreds of chest tubes, hundreds of crikes, and you've worked with live tissue. And so when you do in 6 months, you do your next rotation. I think mine was in Chinle, Arizona, an Indian reservation. You're basically just a doctor and you're treated like one, and you're good at it, man. So
this is post SOMC, Special Operations Medical Course. You go through and you get the paramedic certs and the advanced medical certs, and then you're talking about doing trauma rotations with trauma services and hospitals around the country. How many places do you guys go?
Yeah, so I stayed on the Indian reservation, which was amazing because you're just a doctor. You're cut off, man. You can take a life flight to, I think it was I don't know, Albuquerque, wherever it was. But that's the closest ER. So you're it, man. And you're in there doing surgeries, and you're in there seeing patients. We had a baby who came in that was truly terrifying. This baby had a stenosed trachea. So the trachea was it was bent. And it was me and my partner, and we're students, man. But at that point, you're basically like a doctor. I know I say that and it's crazy and people can't fathom it, but and I'm not that now, man. But when you have all that training and it's all you're doing, you become very good at it. So this kid comes in with a stenosed trachea and like a little baby. And I'm 2 for 5 on my butterfly, Venus or IVs, man. I suck. I'm terrible with peds, with kids. You're on the battlefield. You're not trying to save the life of a kid, hopefully.
Right.
Anyways, they bring this kid in, this little baby, and I look at the baby and we call in a couple of the specialists. This guy takes, 4 hours to get there. We're keeping this kid alive, me and my partner. And we're doing it we have just a chest tube, or
is it a crike?
Tube. Yeah, crike tube, like an NG tube. And we're keeping this kid alive barely because he keeps coming in and out, and we're having to micro adjustments on this tube just through his mouth, this little child. And so the specialist gets in. It takes him 4 hours, man. It's like oh god, it's 3 a.m. and we're exhausted, and we're trying to keep this kid alive, and everybody is there. Okay,
so there's, just so I can picture this, there's no respiratory therapist. It's just you guys.
Yeah.
You've got an ET tube in place that's positional, correct?
Oh yeah. Not only positional, man. Yeah, right.
And you're bagging.
Bagging.
No?
Yes, we're bagging.
Intermittently?
Intermittent. We're trying to keep him going, and for the most part, it's these micro adjustments. But every time this baby moves, man, the entire room's on pins and needles. Like the nurses are trying. Everybody's super helpful, but the ER doc, he wouldn't touch it because it was a ped, and he didn't want to get sued. This next specialist comes in, and he says, "Listen, it takes him 4 hours to get there, so we're doing this for 4 hours." He says, well, what we need to do is we need to crike this baby, but it has a stenosed trachea. So the chances for success are really bad. And we said, okay, well, you're the boss. You let us know. What do you want to do? He said, I don't think you understand. I can't do that. I'm not that. He needed some kind of surgeon, a special respiratory surgeon or something. I was like, okay, well, so what are we going to do? Well, I think, and at this point, the baby was kind of circling the drain. We had kind of exhausted, I guess, all oxygen and, pass flow and all that stuff. So my partner and I, the respiratory specialist says, one of you guys is going to have to do it. I'm like, what are you talking about, man? We're like, no, that's not, that's not what we're here for, man. Like we're here to learn, but we're not here to work on, infants and babies. He says, well, somebody's got to do it, and I'm not going to do it, and he's not going to do it. So one of you guys has to do it. I couldn't believe this. I was like, okay, well. So I looked at my partner, and he was very good, very capable. We were both pretty capable dudes, but I had a lot of confidence in him, man, like a lot of confidence in him. So I said, well, I think you should do it. He's like, I'm not doing it. I was like, oh man. Well, I was like, you're better than me at this, bro. I was like, well, let's just do this. He's like, let's draw straws or whatever. He's like, let's flip a coin. I say, okay, let's flip a coin. And I said, I said, okay, fine, whatever. We flip a coin. And I come up with the deal. I've got to do it. Like, okay. And I'm scared, man. I'm shaking because it's a baby, right? I don't want to have this kid's life in my hands. And so he helps me out. And so I start. Essentially, what you do is you take the neck, like it's right, but the baby has no landmarks. Like I've never dealt with this. I've dealt with this on grown men with like easy landmarks because we've got our Adam's apple. You go right between the cricothyroid membrane. Can't believe I remember that. Anyway, you go right between.
People don't realize how fast this stuff goes away if you're not using it every day. If you're not speaking medical, it's like a language. It just goes away.
It's crazy.
I'm in the same spot. But yeah, the landmarks, all these hard cartilaginous rings that are supposed to be the things you can count down and figure out where your spacing is and know exactly what you're hitting. And if you don't have them because the baby's not so developed,
exactly, and
you're just firing blindly in the dark. You're looking at a neck that is a bunch of skin, and you're hoping that there's a tube underneath that you're going to cut.
And there's so much skin, and I was like,
and and for babies, obviously, there's a lot of very, very superficial vasculature, so you could cut into blood vessels and end them that way too.
Exactly, and so because you have the nerve, artery, vein, and lymphatic running right between. So I'm like, oh man, I'm playing operation.
No, it's a nightmare.
Yeah, like I'm a soldier, man. I'm not a, so I'm like, okay, fine. And so I start blunt dissecting, and we get to the trachea. My partner holds the neck, and it's so tiny, man. It's like the size of a straw. And I've got a trach. I've got like a really little trach, the smallest one, because this is the normal baby. Anyway, so I make this super small incision. It's too small. We can't get it in. I'm like, oh, and the crowd's like, oh, and the tension's ramping up, and I'm like, oh man. He was like, some nurse in the back's like, come on, man, you got this. I'm like, thanks. So I make another incision. It's too small for the trach to go in. And finally, I make it a little bigger. But I can see, like, in the periphery, man, it's so small. Anyway, I get the trach in, and we position it properly, pull it out a little bit, and I suture I think it was like 2 sutures just to keep it in place. And I suture just enough my partner does the suture. And we kept that baby alive, man, the two of us. Well, the room kept him alive, man, but him and I did the procedure. And I think it was
the thing that the doctor didn't have the balls to go and attempt.
Yeah, I guess so, man.
But I want to reflect on that, because what is the training value when you have to take that skill set? And I'm seeing you relive it a little bit. It's pretty intense. And having been in those rooms, I know.
Yeah, man.
What is the training value when you take it down range and you've got one of your buddies, or you've got some enemy combatant, or a child who gets, incidentally blown up or something?
There's nobody I'd rather have on the battlefield if I was shot or blown up than an 18 Delta qualified, or I guess SOMC, that level of training, with the exception of maybe a trauma surgeon. But even a trauma surgeon, once the bullets are flying, what's he going to do, man? Guys like us, I would rather look to. I can do it. Back then, I could do a chest tube in 45 seconds, fast. The trauma surgeon can do that in 18 seconds. They're just that much. They're so much better. They're so amazing. They're so fast.
Right. But they're also doing it in a sterile environment with bright lights.
Exactly. Nobody's shooting at them, man. Like, you're not worried about getting blown up, blasted. You're not doing it under night vision, right? So, and most of the times, like early on in Iraq, we're doing everything under night vision. I was in a Black Hawk given an IV once, and you can't hear anything. And the dude over the radio is like, oh yeah, you just wait till we get back. And I was like, what are you talking about, bro? Like, there's no waiting. There's no, so anyways, like I would say that entire program is incredible. That was so anyways, that was a big block of training for me. It gives you have tremendous advantage, but down range and the training that we do, that we receive, the hands-on saves lives, period. I mean, you can have Pete out there screaming all they want to, but guys are alive because we do the training we do in special operations, medical facility, period. I mean, bottom line.
We're talking about live tissue training, which is to say an animal that has been, what is the word they use?
They've been put on an anesthetic plane.
Anesthetized. That's what I'm looking for. Yeah. So they've basically they've done nerve blocks, so the pain is not going to be something they can feel, but they're basically a living, breathing circulatory system.
Right.
And you can practice things that a human being.
Yes.
The human being is the $1 million mannequin. This is the next best thing. And
exactly.
And what else can you do?
Right. And the difference is when you have just a plastic mannequin, it's totally different. And so guys who come out of that schoolhouse, and SEALs come there, and obviously Air Force guys come, PJs come there. We're the best on the planet, man, period. There's nobody comes close to the guys coming out of that schoolhouse. But it wouldn't be the same if they didn't have that live tissue training. And then more Americans be dead, period. There's no substitute for it. And you have so much confidence. Like, your confidence level is unbelievable, man. I was in the last stage of the Q course, Robin Sage, and we were in the back of a Humvee, and this is just for fun. Nobody's shooting at us. But the Humvee's going crazy, and the instructor's screaming in my face, and there's fake blood everywhere. And he was like, "You can't get that. You can't get that IV." And I was like, "Man, this ain't shit, bro. Whatever, easy." Obviously,
when you have that, it looks like cockiness, but it's extreme confidence on the skill set.
Yeah, absolutely. You're trained incredibly well. So I guess, after that course, you do, what did I do after that? I think I did, you do a phase 2, which is like Ranger school. That sucked, man. That was not fun. That was not fun at all. That I had back then, the instructors were, we had some absolute savages, man, and they were really tough. They were gate holders, man. And I had one in particular that I thought we were going to fight, man. We were going to fight. I mean, this dude, 6'4", 6'5", this dude, great guy, tremendous war fighter, but he had a little bit of PTSD, I think. And anyways, man, this dude's throwing Artie Sims, and the contact is way far. I mean, it is miles away. So I don't get down. Everybody else gets down. And he said, you think you don't need to get, you lost it, man. And then, I should have got down with those dudes, right or wrong, but I was using my mind. I was like, well, it's not going to affect us. So let me just keep walking. Wrong answer, bro. Wrong answer. So I stand up, my buddy's there watching me. He's like, oh God, here goes, Jordan again. But anyway, so I'm there, and this dude comes up to me, and it was like, and I'm an idiot for doing this. I must have been tired or something, but he said, you think you don't have to get down? And I said, well, they're a mile away. I was like, no. This dude gets in my face, and he's like, you want to take a poke at me? And then right then it was like, oh, wow, man. Like, well, and he's got his fist balled up, and he's a big dude. And I was like, well, I said, I guess we're going to do this. And so I, get in your combat stance, about to get smashed by some 6'6", PTSD'd out, giant. But anyway, that went over badly. But anyway, I got through it. That story is actually funny. I'll truncate it, but
that's fair. No, all of the stuff that I heard is like the extremes that every force has its version of some of these things, where some guy gets sent to the schoolhouse because he needs to detox and it doesn't do the thing that it needs to. It ends up ramping him up. And you just end up with a really dangerous, scary guy that's just like smashing on guys that are supposed to be training, and takes it like a little bit too far.
Yes, absolutely.
It does teach you how to manage people, though, and I know that's a big piece of human management is a big piece of being a Green Beret. And
absolutely.
My buddies that go overseas, you're dealing with those guys in indige forces for sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's the strange thing is this happens in basic training. You don't say a word, but in the Q course, and it's another GB, and you don't push back, you fail. Oh, you don't have the guts to fight me? It's like, I do, actually, and that's the problem, right? It's like, here we go. Anyways. And I'm probably going to lose. I mean, I'm the guy who weighs me by 100 pounds or something. But
sure.
Whatever, man. You got to fight.
Yeah, but you got to show that you have the instinct to get there, at least, that you have that no quit attitude.
Right. Sometimes you got to fight, man. It's like one of the team sergeants used to say, it was like, man, this guy was a big Star Trek buff. It was like, sometimes, man, you can't call down Starship Enterprise and shoot photon torpedoes. Sometimes you just got to fight. Roger that. Yep.
Yeah.
That's a fact.
All right. I'm taking you away from the story for just one moment. We're going to say thanks to the folks at MyPatriot Supply who enabled this. Man, they probably could have benefited from some of this emergency food in addition to some of the other wild stuff that goes on. Check them out over at Prepare Like Kyle. That's the website, preparelikekyle.com. The deal they're running right now is the 4-week emergency food kit. You're buying that and you're getting 4 free 72-hour food kits. That's kind of like almost a 50% value on top of what you're getting there. The upside to it is you can break these things up and put them in different places. You can put them in a go bag. You can put them in a stay bag. You can put them in different parts of your house. If you're worried about certain things that might be more vulnerable, you can stash them in a getaway place or a vehicle and so on. Check that out. It's over 2,000 calories per day. They're easy to prepare, and they last for up to 25 years. So you've got something, you don't have to use it right away. The 72-hour kits, they might be really good for hiking or preparing, for practicing. That's always a smart idea, kind of like do a dry run through. Check them out again at preparelikekyle.com. It's preparelikekyle.com to get to MyPatriot Supply, and you're going to get the 4-week emergency food kit with 4 additional 72-hour food kits. This is smaller than the one that we have, but it's definitely a good start, and you don't want to find yourself caught behind the 8 ball if something bad were to happen. Preparelikekyle.com. All right, we're going to dive right back in to the interview. Here we go.
So anyway, after that, I go to, I guess I do language, which was amazing, man. Language, it was tough. I got the, I have an affinity for languages, and so Arabic was cool, and I had a good time. But it was a year, it was a year long, so I did very well. I got I think I had like a 2.2 or something near that, 2.1 plus maybe something, but I did very well. Finished that, and then you do Robin Sage. Robin Sage for us was challenging because there was some strike going on or something, so we didn't have the same level of support. So Robin Sage, man, we starved. We didn't have food. And this was right before SEER school, right? Like we starved. And I remember people who were in my Robin Sage class or team were in my SEER team. And needless to say, my SEER was not as hard as other people's SEER. And people on my squad, I guess you could say, because we were not going to starve again. I'll just leave it there.
Sometimes you got to make a decision. Yeah. I had a moment when I was running through SEER school up in Washington State, and they were having us sleep out underneath a poncho hooch or something. And I looked around and I saw that they had this permanent structure that was built to keep the firewood warm for the instructors.
Yeah.
So I just waited till everybody was asleep, and then I went in there because that was a solid, like windproof, waterproof structure. And I was like, yeah, you guys can all sleep underneath a poncho hooch with like 2 open ends of it and like 1 layer of nylon between you and the night. Like it's 20 degrees outside or 15 degrees. I'm gonna go sleep inside that permanent tent. It's all covered with wood and stuff. It was great. And I was warm as a bug in a rug.
Right, absolutely. You have to do what you have to do, man. I mean,
sometimes you make a decision to change the training value for your own sort of a survival value.
Right, exactly. But
there's a lesson in that too, though, right?
There is, absolutely. It's you have to be resourceful. You have to be resourceful, and I think that more than anything else is what people are trying to teach you in a lot of those courses, like Green Beret, a lot of the Green Beret schools. So yeah, obviously Robin Sage. Robin Sage is basically it's like it is. Unconventional warfare training. You go and you embed yourself with a partner force, an indigenous force. You convince them to trust you, and then you do operations together. So this is largely a template for a 12-man ODA. And so that school represents, that class or that block of training represents its own challenges.
Is it Pinelandia still? Is that what it's called?
It's Pinelandia. Right. So in that believe it or not, that is the first phase of intelligence training that a Green Beret gets. That is the first layer, but you don't know it. You don't know it. I finish, I graduate, and I end up waiting to get placed in my group. And I don't know where I'm going yet. And then I'm doing combatives with a buddy of mine, John Long. This dude's a beast. I mean, he's like another 6'4" dude, just jacked, great jits, great stand up. And we would just train. So we had like a fight club going in right on base. And we would do that, and we'd have several guys come and train with us. But Johnny Long knew a guy in 5th group named Tracy Irving. And he calls over, he says to me, he says, "Jordan, you're a badass, man, or you're going to the Criff." I was like, "Dude, I don't even know what you're talking about, man. I don't know what that is." He said, "No, you're going." I said, "Well, what is it?" He's like, "Oh, they're the best. They're the most cutting edge, teams and special operations." I was like, "Look, maybe I just start at the ground level. I don't want to make it." "No, you're going." I said, "Okay, fine. Sounds good." He makes the call. And when I get to 5th group, man, I'm a cherry. I don't know anything. You're like, your eyes are real wide, and all you've been told is, hey, just shut your mouth. Don't talk. Don't tell anybody anything. And that's it. Show up. Okay, cool. So I do that. I end up getting pulled into the Sergeant Major's office. And the Sergeant Major of, 5th group Criff, which I had come to learn after that, was basically all the guys who were triple nickel guys, all the guys who did the Afghanistan, the horse soldier operations. And so that's who these guys were. And so these would be my mentors. I go in to see the Sergeant Major, and he's like, "Hey, man, what the fuck are you doing here?" I said, "What do you mean?"
These guys are legends too. That's so cool.
Oh, yeah. I'm like, I was told to report. I was like, "That's not what I mean." I said, "Who the fuck do you think you are that you can come into my Criff right out of the Q course?" And I'm like, for a second, I'm like, "Oh, got it. Okay, here we go. Let me turn on the correct response. I'm the baddest motherfucker coming out of that Q course. I can outshoot, I can outfight, I can out PT everybody coming out of there. I'm in the 90th percentile of all those applicants." And he looks at me, he's like, just nods, just like this. "Get out." Fucking perfect. Okay. So I make it. Go out, which, I don't
That's
think
a 50-50 gamble there, right?
Exactly, man. But what do you say? Like, "Oh, I don't know, man. Get the fuck out, pussy." So it's,
yeah,
you have to meet force with force. I mean, obviously it's a culture of warriors and killers, to be perfectly honest. And so if you show weakness, that's how you'll be treated. And I didn't lie to him. I mean, my PT was off the charts, and I was a very good shooter. I was a very capable shot. And then in terms of fighting, yeah, I did a lot of combatives in terms of, extreme fighting, ultimate fighting, and things of that nature. So I didn't lie to him. I was a good candidate, and I was good at keeping my mouth shut. I get to see my team sergeant. I report, with my bags. Everybody's going to and fro. They just came back from deployment, and I'm going to talk to the team sergeant. I'm thinking, okay, well, finally, now I'm going to get my welcome to the team. No, man. So I go in to see Mike Peden. Mike Peden, this dude, huge Iowa, corn-fed farm dude, wears, hockey pads on his legs on target. This guy says, and a great guy, white, bright blue eyes, blonde hair. He says 3 things to me. He's like, "Come on in. Sergeant First Class, I can't pronounce your name. Shooting, fighting, CQB." And then he gets up and he leaves. I'm thinking, what the fuck, man? What the fuck? So that was my welcome. I ended up, Solder City 6 months later, engaged a couple dudes on a cupola, and he came over. He was all excited. Oh, welcome to the team, welcome to the team. But he didn't speak to me once in those 6 months until he saw that, I was able to do the job. And that was the nature of these guys. They were just, I'm not a blood or a crip, but same kind of thing, man. It's just pretty wild.
It's a tribe. Will you tell people, because I think a lot of people have no idea. When we were starting, before we got going, I was telling you, one of my buddies came out of that 5th group, CRIF, and it's a specific thing. And if you know what it is, but a lot of people, even people that are familiar with the Green Berets and what Special Forces is, may not know about this very small subset. So maybe you can kind of give them, first of all, what does it stand for? And then give them kind of an outline of what that means.
Yeah. So the crisis response, what it's called now, is the Crisis Response Force. It used to be called the CIF, crisis, or the Commander's in Extremis Force. And it always changes labels as the years go on. It gets its funding from JSOC. So the same pot of money, right? It is a very special unit. It is one of the best kept secrets in special operations, simply because they have access to a large pot of resources. They share the commands share this unit, right? So when Benghazi happened, I was part of that call out. My sergeant major pulled me from a troop and put me on a different troop and said, "We need experienced guys." Perfect, thanks, man. So I ended up flying over. But the bottom line is your command is now JSOC. Typically, your command is going to be CJSOTF if you're under just a regular ODA. But in the CRIF, you have two commands. Especially when you're operational, you have two commands. So it's a strange dynamic, and you can play both against each other if you're a smart Green Beret. But anyways, that's a story for another time.
Mm-hmm.
But anyways, so the CRIF, they essentially do hostage rescue operations and other specific operations. And so you have specialized training. You have a finishing school called Sephardic, which is, in my opinion, it's incredible. The CQB and the speed at which you learn CQB and then you conduct CQB is phenomenal. And then you obviously have SOTIC, which is sniper schools. But the mentality in the CRIF is very different than an ODA, whereas an ODA is full spectrum war, and you are largely there to conduct unconventional warfare, working through a partner force, for instance. The CIF is there to do unilateral strike. And not always. Sometimes they'll revert back to their roots. Sometimes in Iraq, our sister troop was training the ICTF, which were their tier 1 equivalent, which were their hostage rescue or strike force. That was a unilateral strike force. So they would train those guys and go out on target with them. But if you're for most of my career, I did unilateral strike under JSOC units. That's what it is, man.
This is specifically direct action mission. Here's your target. Here's the location, or find the location and go solve the problem over there, that kind of thing.
Exactly. You will have a hire that will give you a target packet, and you'll take one off the top, right? So in Iraq, my first trip, we had TF Green, which was a strike force, and then you have TF Knight, which was SAS, and you had TF Red, which are the Rangers, and then you had us. I think we were TF Black or whatever it was. And we would all just take, well, with the exception of the Rangers, they didn't get access to some of the operations, but for us and TF Green, we were interchangeable, man. Like we were just taking, oh, okay, these guys went out, got a dry hole, you guys try this night. Okay, Green tried this last night. Black, you guys try this night. Okay, perfect. And so we would just keep running targets. And back then, the fighting was really, really hard. That's when the surge was really in full gear. And it was the middle of Baghdad, Adamia, Solder City, and all these crazy neighborhoods. But yeah, you learn.
Who was TF Green? So folks understand.
It's I'm supposed to say this stuff, but it's
I don't know. So I'm going to assume it's like a CAG, or you call them whatever the unit, whatever they're supposed to be called today. That's where I'm going.
I don't even know. I try not to talk.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair. I don't know what you're allowed to say either, but I'm just reading into what's going on there so people have an understanding. We're talking about tiered units doing JSOC missions, doing doing the real pointy end that people always think when you think of special forces, when you think of special operations missions, people think of HR, hostage rescue, and DA, direct action, going in, finding bad guys, solving those problems, and all the great war stories seem to come out of that. Is that fair?
It's fair. It's fair. I didn't know what I signed up for when I went to the CRIF. I didn't know what it was.
Yeah, I have to imagine that, because like you don't know until you know. Like you said, it's not like if they weren't telling you this is where you want to go and you ended up there, people spend a lot of time trying to get there.
Yeah, I had no idea, man. I went there. I'm really good at finding ways to. I think more than anything, yeah, I was an in shape guy, but mentally, I was just really good at learning fast. I'm really good at understanding problem sets and trying to figure out the fastest way that I can, or the simplest way to solve any problem, is what I was really good at. And I hope I continue to be good at that. But
can you tell me problem solving? Because I've heard this before, and I find this to be interesting. About that's not what people necessarily associate with great soldiers per se, but it does seem specific to special operations in general, but more specifically Green Berets. It's a problem solving idea and a mentality. Is that something that is trained in the Q course? Is that something that is selected for in the Q course, or how does that work?
it is, and it does. It starts with the battery of tests that we take. Obviously, we take IQ tests and personality tests and things of this nature. But every school you go to, it's going to challenge you. But Robin Sage, that's the point. You have to do an impossible task. You have to solve an impossible problem, essentially. And so it starts there, right? And so if you look at the problem set and you look at Vietnam and the guys who the Green Berets who worked in Vietnam, the problem set is it's relationship based, it's intelligence based, it's human based. We want you 12 guys to go into this area, make friends. Oh, perfect. Make friends with people who may just kill you outright. And then you have to convince them that it's in their best interest to help you fight a war. Great. So how do you train that? And I think this is why a lot of our training is an intelligence-based training, right? So a lot of the dudes will train to the level of a CIA case officer. They'll be accredited. And that training is what makes a 12-man ODA effective, largely. Because if you can't, and look, guys will say this all the time, it's great to have a strike force, but if there's nobody to strike, well, how do you develop, how do you drive to targeting? It's really about driving targeting at that level, right? So at the tactical level, we need to drive targeting. At the strategic level, we'll have requests to interdict certain individuals who affect the national strategic, like a lot of these high value targets. And so that's why that's what makes JSOC units useful, is they're going after targets that affect the strategic campaign, essentially. They're affecting the campaign at the strategic level, whereas it may take a tactical level force to make that impact, but it's necessary. And so to be able to do that effectively and efficiently, I know we spoke on it earlier. The target or the assault force package or the strike force package that gives us the ability to do that is incredibly comprehensive. We have some great minds, but we take the best from every unit, every service. So we take the best from the Air Force. We take the best from the Navy. And we have green suiters. We obviously have the Army guys there, and we're friends. Like, we commingle. It's very professional. It's an incredibly professional group of guys, and everybody gets along and everybody goes out together. A buddy of mine used to say, a team that parties together, fights together. I don't know if that's true or not, but we'd go out.
Sounds right.
Yeah, pretty much. We'd go out with the Navy guys and we go out with the Air Force guys, and because we're all in it together. And so, yeah, I remember one night one of our EOD guys got shot. It was a big deal, man. Like, it was a really big deal, and everybody's really concerned. It's so I know there's rivalry in and among the services and whatnot, but the reality is, when dudes are shooting at you, all that goes away. Nobody cares, man. Obviously, when you look at the hero Takagara, man, is there any question? Like, It's an Air Force. It's Chapman, man. There's no question. It's, when you read the reports and you see it. So I don't know, guys at that level, nobody really cares too much. The award stuff, nobody worries too much about it. Some guys don't care at all. A lot of guys that we don't even know. I don't even know. Like, somebody asked me the other day what I had Bronze Stars for. I don't know, man. Like, I did my job. I don't know. And I don't know what people want to hear, man. Like, the write-ups, I've never read the write-up. One was for, I think, there was some my last deployment, there was a 5th group team that was taking fire, and I was in a position to, I did my job. Just did my job. And so anyway, bottom line is,
yeah. The reason I'm bringing this up is because we're going to get into some stuff where you've been kind of demonized from what I can understand. I've read the cursory news reports, and there's 2 things I want to hammer home to the audience. We'll take a little breather and we'll come back into it. But part 1 is people who do this job, and if you don't have an appreciation for what Green Berets are, like I said, I'm blessed to have a couple friends who are, so I get it. I'm more than most. It's a real specific thing. If you have guys like Dick Couch, have you ever read the book Chosen Soldier?
Dick Couch, no.
Dick Couch was a SEAL. He was a SEAL officer, and he went through BUDS. And then as a 60-year-old something man, he decided to go and run. He did the Forging of the Warrior Elite, I think, or something to that effect. He followed a BUDS class as a grown-up, like as a journalist, and so he wrote about it. And then he went and followed a guy going through, or like a whole series of guys going through the Q course.
Oh, wow.
And he tracked Green Berets kind of being forged as well. And he came out of it, converted, and he's not thought of well in the SEAL community in some ways, because he said Green Berets are more important and the stuff they bring to the battlefield is more important. And if you haven't read something like that to understand how you can even convert a guy who's a SEAL and a believer in naval special warfare,
right,
to like how important the tool set is that the ODA brings and the CRIF brings and the other guys that have matriculated out of those programs. I want to just point out that we're not talking about just like PT studs who can shoot.
Right.
And that's what I've been kind of letting you expose to people as they're listening. This is not a group of people that don't understand strategy, intelligence, the higher, operations that are happening in war. These are not just guys who are like on a squad kicking down a door and then it's like, well, I just did my job and I went back home and, I shoot guns and I maintain them kind of thing. That's not who we're talking about. I wanted that to be clear.
Right.
And then,
you basically run a 12-man ODA, you run your own private war. And if you are really good if you're the human intelligence guy, then you have your own war on top of that. And you can really affect things in that whatever region you're in. You can really affect change at the strategic. I mean, it is staggering. I was blessed with being able to go to have a specific amount of, specific training to do just that. And so my last trip to Afghanistan, and I had done this early on, like, let me just say this, man. When I was in the CRIF, I came back from my first trip and I was blown away. It was pretty incredible. But then I got voluntold to do another school. And guys were joking about it. Guys who'd been there, no, and everybody was turning this down. No, I'm not doing that school. I'm not doing that school. There's no way. You're never going to make me do that school. I think 18 of us, it was a small class. 18 of us started, 3 of us finished. And I didn't even know what it was, man. I didn't have any clue what this was going to be. And I can't really talk about it. But when I came out of it, even then I didn't really know how it fit into the puzzle. But I knew a hell of a lot more than I did before, coming from just the finishing piece. Once you understand the targeting, it changes everything. It allows you to create solutions to problems that aren't there for anybody else to see, obviously, right? So let's say the problem is we need to go find this guy because he is the head of XYZ clan of the Taliban. Perfect. Let's find him. Let's fix him. Send a strike force to finish him. Kill, capture. Great. That's the bread and butter of any strike force, any JSOC strike force. So I think a Green Beret, quite simply, is a thinker. We try to find the easiest way to solve a problem simply because we don't have the bodies a lot of times. And so, the Q course really drills that into us. And that obviously is in contrast with a CRIF guy or a JSOC operator or SEAL or Marine, or 82nd Airborne Shock Troop. So I guess our jobs are a little more nuanced. We want to be able to develop relationships that we can trust. And at a minimum, we want to be able to figure out the people who we can't trust. And so a lot of the operations that I've done downrange, in country, it's me. It's me and a terp, me and an interpreter or whatever. And typically I've got a grenade and a pistol, and he's got a load of shit in his pants because he's terrified. And, I mean, I gotta be honest, man. Like I went through, there's one trip that I went through several interpreters just because, you're doing things that CIA case officers won't do. Obviously they got blown up back, you saw the whole Hunter bin Laden story. They made a movie of it, but that was a real incident, and they stopped going out and doing field work after that. And so that was really, we shouldered it. Once that changed over, we shouldered a lot of that, the field work, human intelligence guys in the military. And so, but to do that kind of work, you're meeting guys in the middle of fucking some, city in a country where people are looking for you. And so obviously you're dressed different and you're acting different. And, you have to wear a beard. So like my military ID, I don't have it anymore. I got a photo of it, but it's me with a big long beard with really long hair. And they used to call me the Nuristani, man. That was my nickname, the Nuristani, because I had a red beard. And I guess, everybody in Nuristan, fucking redheads. But I fit in. I fit in more or less, and you wear what they wear, and you eat what they eat. And so you're trying to get yourself, you're trying to survive and not have your interpreter die. But largely you're breaking gate on your own, and you're conducting you're doing what you're doing. You're trying to create white space for the guys on the base that you're working in. You're creating targetry for, obviously the people in your team and anybody else who can use it. And so that's a small part. I can't really talk too much about that part of it, but there is certainly something to be said for one Spartan, one war. And that is essentially what a lot of guys do. Mm-hmm. And it's hard to be good at it. Not a lot of guys are good at it. I'm going to be perfectly honest. It's hard to be good at simply because it takes a different part of your brain. I'll go back to one of the first schools. And look, half the training that I've done has been this human intelligence side of training. And it's been with guys who were the best at it, and they take it really seriously, and the schools are really tough. But going back, one of the schools I did it was taught by the SRR, okay, which obviously they're the intelligence component of the SAS, or were. And these guys were all Northern Ireland guys, man. These guys were salty, bro. Like, these guys were savages. And in that school, you learn to do things that, I mean, you learn to do it a different way than, say, an intelligence agency would do it, or a policing agency would do it, like in the FBI or the CIA. It's just a different mentality. And so, and being a soldier, we look at the battlefield or the battle space much differently. Our ethos is completely different. And this is a great precursor. This is going to dovetail quite nicely into what I think we're going to discuss next. But my job is essentially to protect Americans, period. The oath I take to the Constitution, it's probably the same oath that other agencies do, civilian agencies, but the difference is, I'm not a civilian, bro. Like, I'm ready to trade my life in a second to protect who I need to protect. And if you look at the ethos of any soldier, airman or sailor, and we're going into a house, we're going to put our plate, which is our armor, between us and our friends. And then if you take that to the next level, we volunteer to do these things because we believe that, not so much, we do believe in each other, but we want Americans to live good lives, man. Like, when you're looking at, and I know guys who have a crazy amount of trips. I know guys who, their last deployment in 2016, they were with their son who they had seen graduate from the Q course, and their son was in the 82nd, and they would meet for salsa night or whatever. I mean, this war spanned 2 decades for Americans, but we look at it from a standpoint of we are here to conduct operations, and we're here to protect Americans, and we're here to serve the will of the commander-in-chief. Whether the Twin Towers, Building 7, whether it is or not. And let me just say this I think is important to understand. I know that guys like Andrew Tate, and I understand the logic. Like, don't fight for these countries. They're just they're gonna send you to war, and you're gonna die. But here's the deal, man. Like, other guys are fucking fighting. Other guys are fighting. And if there's other guys who are willing to fight, then I have to be able to look at myself in the mirror, man. Like, I have to fight, so I'm going to fight. And I get it. Look, I get it. Building 7 is suspicious. It is. And even if, it was an inside job and that was done to propagate war in the Middle East, I'm still going to fucking sign up. If I knew that back then, I still sign up, man, because there's other guys who are going to fight and die. So what do you want, and I know that.
I understand that. I do. There's an evaluation of conscience. It's a vocational question. I think man has always had this question, right? But especially a certain type of man who just says, who shall I send? And if not me, then who?
Exactly.
Yeah. And interestingly enough, I think a lot of the mottos out there, whether it be the Green Berets motto or the SAS motto, they all lead towards this thing, which is a little bit, it's unusual for your average man to go and say, like, who dares wins, right? To liberate the oppressed or to protect the oppressed is a specific kind of mindset. It is a service orientation. So it doesn't click with everybody, obviously.
It doesn't make any sense to it makes sense to Heraclitus, right? So you got Heraclitus, obviously historian. He says, out of 100 warriors, 80, they're useless. 10, they make the fight. 9, we're lucky to have him, but there's 1, he's a warrior, and he'll bring the others back. So if you look at that statistic, it's true, and it's true in special operations. Any component in special operations is really true. But the bottom line is, those 80, they show up. They're there, and maybe they're useless. I don't know, maybe, but they're there, and they do their time, right? And at the end of the day, man, like I have been in some really terrifying situations where I thought certain guys were going to do certain things. And it's not the guy who I thought would step up. It's the guy who I was convinced wouldn't, the Iraqi 90-pound soaking wet dude and, wearing, some old pair of Adidas, and he steps up in a turret when Americans are. So I don't know. War's a tricky beast, man. Like it's tough. It's tough to tell, how it's going to shake out. But at the end of the day, man, like, guys willing to fight, willing to throw themselves into that breach. Okay, I'm gonna give you another one. I don't want to get crazy with this stuff, but Jesus Christ, man, who's probably the baddest dude to ever walk the planet. He says, "There's no greater love than to give your life for your friends." But how do you do that, right? Like, so as a soldier or an airman or any of these dudes, like the 80 guys who are going into war, going into combat, you're looking at yourself in the mirror, waking up, and you have to say that to yourself. You got to convince yourself of that every day, because at the end of the day, man, that's the job. And so I get it. These machine countries and who throw us in the grinder, and these politicians who don't really care about whether they're sending us forward or not. And that's one thing I can say about, President Trump. This guy, I can't remember, he got in trouble for saying this about a female politician. I don't remember her name offhand, but he basically said, okay, fine, Ukraine, you got it. Why don't you go? You go fight, we'll give you a rifle. Because the truth is, there's such a small percentage of guys who are going to step up. You look at 76, small percentage of Americans who stepped up. Mm-hmm. Everybody wants, to be on the side of the victor. Everybody wants to say, yeah, I helped, I was there. But the reality is, man, there's not a lot of dudes there, because it's quite terrifying when it's terrifying. And, but yeah, I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't have changed anything. So
let's dig into the news headline. Let's get there. But before we do, you kind of made, and I don't want to put you in any position to reveal anything you don't normally do, but you made a couple of allusions to trainings or selections you did in West Virginia. Do you want to kind of finish out kind of the military piece of it? I wanted to get foundational for people to understand the background, the mentality of a person that goes and that you weren't just some mercenary rando who stepped up, that there's a lot that went behind that, and a lot of training and experience that was looked for in that room when somebody asked you about what was going on in Venezuela. So anything you want to add to that before we kind of get into the headline piece?
Yeah, no, I think I was approached to do a lot of schools in the military because of my ability to think critically and to strategize. And so my strength is my mind. I did a selection, which is supposed to be the hardest selection in all of the military. I don't know. Is that fair? Is that fair to say that?
I think it's pretty well understood that that's the case.
So I did the selection, and I prepared well for it because I'm an average size, I'm a regular dude, man. I ramp up my numbers in PT by sheer force of will. But I did very well in the school. I absolutely walked through that school. I destroyed it. I was at the end of it, and I ran through the end of it with, your 65-pound rucksack, whatever it was, and I almost knocked. Everybody has a sponsor who's a sergeant major, and I ran past this sergeant major. I almost knocked him over, and he screamed out. He was like, "That's how you come into an RV." And it was like 40 miles later. But I think my success was due to my previous experiences in the military and training and selection events, but my diligence in training and the actual training regimen and program that I built, and it was the program. And so oddly enough, when I was at the fire, and I was speaking to, this was right before you go, one step before that, I spoke to the commander, and obviously you're standing there with your ruck on, you drop your ruck. And he said, "You've been terminated from training." And I said, "You know what, sir?" And I picked up my ruck and I said, "I'll do the whole fucking thing again right now." I couldn't have been able to, but I said it.
But it sounds tough.
Really honest. And he was like, no, you don't get it. And I was pretty animated when I said it. I was like, "Oh, you're animated, man." And he said, "No, you passed." I said, "Okay." So now I go to the fire, and I'm sitting there and I'm fried, man. You run, the better part of a course that's brutal. It was really challenging, and you do it, and you at a really fast time. You're in pain. Your feet, your knee, everything hurts, man. You're seeing like black. You're at this fire, and there's another guy with me, and one of the instructors comes up, one of the cadre comes up, and he says, "Sergeant First," or I was Staff Sergeant at the time, and "Staff Sergeant, you're, Goudreau, right?" I was like, "Yeah, roger that." Or number, whatever my number was, 11 or something. And he says, "We don't have an honor grad in this course, but if we did, you'd be it." And I said, "Oh," I was like, "Cool, man, thanks, bro." And he takes off, and then the guy next to me, he said, "You know who that was?" I said, "I have no idea, bro. I can't even fucking see straight." And he says, "That was Gunny Oaks." I was like, "Cool. Who's that?" He was like, "That's Best Ranger competition winner." It was like, for us, Best Ranger competition's a big deal, man. It's like, it's probably the hardest event that exists. It has there's a death walk in it where you get cold by just stopping. Like, you just fall out, and the teams if you win Best Ranger competition, you're in a very small percentile of the best athletes on the planet.
Mm-hmm.
So he said that, and that was one of probably the best, biggest honors of my life that guy said that to me. So I guess I say all this to say I got through that school, not because I'm a physical anything, but because I was able to strategize in how I would get through the obstacles that were put in front of me and train for those obstacles. And that's always been my way. I try to find the easiest and simplest way through a problem set, much like I did in Venezuela.
All right. So somebody tapped. You got out and you started some private consulting. It sounded like, and you've got obviously you've got a capable resume of some of which you've kind of alluded to, some of which you've elaborated on here. And where were you when you were running the security company?
Yeah, so I basically I did some humanitarian. I did some work in other countries for a while. I took a job for Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico, and I facilitated the reconstruction of I'd say I had half the island. I had very good teams with me, very good people. Some people saw some things from me that were a little, I've always been strong with leadership. I've always been put in leadership positions, whether I wanted it or not, man. Anyways, so that went successfully. But at the tail end of that trip, there were 2 school shootings back to back, Santa Fe, Parkland, and I think there was another one that happened pretty soon thereafter. And it really pissed me off, man. Like I got real upset about it because like I've got, I love kids, like I have nieces, and it was really upsetting to me that nobody had solved this yet. And so when I went back, I started a company to try to figure out how to fix this problem set, like really dig into it. And so I built several templates, and I built a multifaceted approach to school shootings specifically. And one of my points was I needed psychiatrist involvement. I needed a way to stabilize the minds in these schools. And so this was a full comprehensive project. But the other part of it was, if something does happen, right? Like what if something happens? How do you geolocate? How do you find, fix, finish incredibly quickly with the smallest, the most minuscule loss of life possible? That was my mission. And I feel like that we came to a very good template. Like I said, we tested it out in a couple different schools, and they were incredibly happy with it. But I ran into the problem of politics, and I ran into the problem of local law enforcement. They thought that they were capable of handling the situation, and it was kind of one of those things where I was stepping on people's toes. And so I didn't shelve the project, but I had to keep the lights on. And so that's when I was recruited. I get recruited to do, I get pulled into a room by Donald Trump's, so Keith Schiller was a lifelong friend, 20 years plus. And I get pulled in, director of ops in the White House, 2017, 2018, I think. And I'm in a room full of, well-intentioned Americans, global governments, that's, think tank in DC. And these guys want business contracts in Venezuela. Great. Venezuela is run by a dictator. You're not going to get business contracts. Awesome. How do we? I'm like, okay, well, I guess that's why I'm here. It took me about 10.
What the second piece of that though is how did they come to know who you were? Did you have some previous connection to these folks?
That's a good question. I think people probably knew who I was from some of the other work that I had done. Maybe Hurricane Maria. I can't quite remember. There was one guy who was there. Maybe he was the guy who bridged the gap to Keith. I'm not too sure.
Okay.
But like I said, Keith was well-intentioned. I think the guys in global governments were well-intentioned. They legitimately wanted to figure this whole Venezuela thing out. Mm-hmm. The Venezuelans in the room, however, were not well-intentioned. They were, as I'm reading now through the discovery, they were working with the CIA, which was a big red flag. They were working with, people in State departments and had conversations with people in the State Department. And so, in my mind now, this entire episode starts here. That the CIA starts gaining visibility over this operation. And if you really want to look at it, it's really a target of opportunity for the CIA to find anything to make stick on, President Trump. I mean, it sounds crazy, but when you go through all the steps and you look at J6, the lengths that the FBI went in, and I don't have to tell you, man, or the lengths that they went with the Gretchen Whitmer hoax.
Whitmer, yeah.
Whitmer, sorry. Gretchen, the Russia collusion hoax. and obviously we can get into this later, but the FBI agent who created the case against me she was part of the Russia collusion hoax, which went after Flynn, or General Flynn and Roger Stone. So this whole
Was she out of Washington Field?
Yes.
And she was doing counterintelligence?
I don't know what she was doing, but she built the case against me. She was
What's her name?
probably.
Do you mind saying? I'm just really interested because I may know her.
I'm not supposed to, but I'll tell you offline.
All right, fair enough. That's good.
Wouldn't want to I don't know. Anyway,
no, you don't have to. But at the end of the day, this is something that's really important. And this sort of gag instinct that you have to have when you're working in this situation, it seems utterly unacceptable. Imagine if you've been arrested by a police officer for any reason, right? Detective came to interview you. A name and a badge number would be right up front. The joke I used to have with people is that you're not a secret agent when you work for the FBI. And yet they act like they are, and that their names should be hidden. And that's absurd. Our military operators go downrange and do much more dangerous stuff, and they publish their names when they come back. Not always, but they often do. And they're not classified names. Maybe the place they were doing, or what maybe the award is. But they're not. You're not a secret agent when you work for the Bureau if you're doing federal law enforcement. So for somebody to come after you and not be able to say the name, that is telling in and of itself for people. And I think they should understand that too.
Right.
It wasn't always like that either. So
yeah, pretty disheartening. So I guess my overall, as a soldier, one of the things you don't have to one of the things you don't worry about being downrange is Americans are Americans. We're all fighting the same cause. We're fighting on the same team. Well, I came to realize, man, and I knew about the CIA, having worked with them in country, that they are not, like, this whole America, they are not fighting for America. At least this CIA that was embedded with me, man, with us, whatever. It was pretty wild. So I have 2 CIA assets in the room with me. I didn't know that at the time. They had several meetings that I'm learning about. One was with the Colombian Intelligence Service. Obviously, CIA representatives. There's a South American guy who was CIA, Juan Cruz. Obviously, Gina Haspel and Juan Cruz are thick as thieves. So this went right up to the top, and this was essentially a great way to really hurt, Donald Trump. And back then, I don't want to say the Trump administration because you can't. The Trump administration back then was so fragmented between the people who were working against Donald Trump, like, the Gina Haspels and the Bill Barrs and the Mike Pompeos and Elliot Abrams and all of these individuals. And Elliot Abrams, if you read my discovery, it is a who's who of the State Department at the highest levels. It is mind blowing. So these people, for instance, Elliot Abrams, right in my discovery, one of the guys from Global Governments in his 302 basically says that he called him and, was talking to Elliot Abrams. Okay, perfect. Well, fast forward, a year and a half, when everything happens and the operation Sabotaged, Elliot Abrams goes in front of the Senate subcommittee hearing and basically says, "No, we just learned about this. We had no idea." And it's,
oh wow! And was that an open door or a closed door hearing?
I'm sure it was closed door, man. Like I have it all. No, it's open door. It's an open door hearing. And
so he has an open testimony under oath, obviously, if you're testifying, that they didn't know anything about it. And you have discovery saying that, at least implicating by another party. So I guess it's hearsay a little bit, but somebody indicating that, this is the person I was talking to.
Right, exactly.
Wild.
So for my part, I did my due diligence in Venezuela. And listen,
what was the ask? What was the ask that got you involved, and what made you say yes?
Flip the country. Okay.
How explicit was the instruction?
It's pretty obvious. When you read the discovery, it's pretty obvious.
Okay.
So it's pretty obvious. Me being me, listen, man, like I'm not doing anything unless I'm approved to do it. It's just how I need to know that this is. And so the individual, like, representations were made to me Okay, I take those representations to heart because these people are Americans. I know who they are. I've done my due diligence on these people. I know they're serious people. So I get sent by this group, this meeting, to go to Colombia and essentially red hat this thing to make sure that it's even possible, right? So I need to make sure that it's good to go. Before I leave, I know what I'm going to do. I know exactly what I'm going to do because I study and I read the nature of the country. I do my entire prep of the country. I do a copious amount of research, and so I understand what needs to happen in the country. I realize that 30 April, the popular rebellion coup that Juan Guaido tries and Leopoldo Lopez tries fails, and it fails for one reason, because they don't have military buy-in. Nobody in the military trusts them. Cool. Contrast that with Chavez, when Chavez, took the country and flipped the country. What was the difference? Chavez had the military. It's not rocket science.
Okay.
And so I think during the course of the entire operation, man, everybody thought I was doing X when really I'm doing Y. And the reason I'm basically building X because when you're doing a human intelligence operation like that, it's really and you have a condensed amount of time, like a year, and it's of a year. It's not a lot of time. I need to understand who's green, who's red, who's yellow, right? Like green, I can trust these guys. I've ops tested these guys thoroughly. This person's not going to betray me. He's doing these things for good. He has solid motivations. Not only that, but he has made good on several, I guess, tasks that I've asked of him. Okay, that's green. There's very few of those guys.
That's a validated source and somebody in your operation.
Absolutely. What you would call vetted, I guess, but vetted to a degree where most people aren't going to spend 6 months to a year vetting somebody. They're going to Google them. I'm talking like a serious level of loyalty that you can only flesh out through serious ops testing. The next category is red. Red is easy. Red is bad. Red is the bad guys. Red is quite simple. Red is why we have confusing geopolitical policy in Venezuela right now, because Donald Trump, he trusts the devil he knows. Nicolas Maduro is red. He's the bad guy. He doesn't trust anybody who's yellow. And that's the next one. Yellow. Who's yellow? Yellow is the people that you don't know. They're the most dangerous people. The yellow, when you're yellow, nobody has an idea if what your motivations are. You may be lying. You may still be useful, but you may be useful for, relaying information to the enemy that you want them to have for misdirection or whatever. So if you look at the operation, I planned it to be as simple as possible. What was it? And I've asked this of a lot of interviewers or whoever, just, what was the goal of the operation? What was the strategic goal of the operation? And everybody knows what the strategic goal of the operation was, right? We want regime change. Cool. But tactically, how do you get there? So what's at the tactical level, what do you do? Well, you need the military. Well, how do you get the military? You make friends. Just like Robin Sage. How do you do that?
Yeah.
Well, they need to trust me because those people have families. They have sons and daughters. And if I betray them, their sons and daughters die and they go to prison or they die. So it's a really serious game that gets played at the strategic level, the political level. And so this is the game I was playing. It's funny when I watch. It's not funny. It's really terrible for somebody like me to see it. But when you see the news and they basically said, this guy was going to assassinate the president, or he was invading, or it was an incursion. I'm pretty good, man. Like, I'm pretty good with a blaster, and I'm pretty good at leading men in small teams and whatnot. But there is no way you're going to land on a beach and you're going to flip a country. That's not how that's done.
Okay, and that, so there's always ops inside of ops, I feel like, right?
Yes, there's inside of ops.
And one of the major ops is the PSYOP version of it, or the information op, and spinning information. And what I recall hearing, and so this is why I was most interested when you said people don't want to tell my story, is because I didn't know the background on you, but I can guess some things just by knowing you're a Green Beret. But what I heard is like an 8-man or a 10-man force was supposedly landing in Venezuela and going to take the country. And that sounds like what a crazy person would do. That doesn't sound like what an operator would do. And it doesn't sound like it would ever be like there's any chance for it to be effective.
Right.
And maybe that's the most interesting part is how it was spun. Do you make anything of that headline or that the sort of the cover story that came out from the media?
Yeah, it's brilliant work by the CIA and the Venezuelan opposition and these entities that really needed to protect themselves. So, yeah, you hit the nail on the head. You don't invade countries with dudes like, a handful of guys in fishing boats, man. That's not how you do it. That said, they were part of the operation. They had their piece to play. And when we walk through it, like when you walk through it, you'll understand my decision making. So I have to. Are you familiar with game theory?
Mm-hmm. At least cursory.
Right. So essentially, like the decisions that I make on the battlefield or in any military theater, they're not emotional. They're never emotional. It has to be results based or risk assessment conscious. And so as I keep going down this rabbit hole, as my mission keeps getting degraded and sabotaged, I get to the eventual place where my team is trapped, and I have to make a dilemma. We don't have to talk through this right now because I'm really skipping ahead.
Yeah, let's first talk about what the broad stroke of the plan was. You said what the goal is. It sounds like the goal is regime change.
Yes.
Would it be? Let me ask this too for those who might be curious. I know I am. Would it be fair to say that you've been given mission sets that were not 100% explicit, like go do this thing there, where someone said, we need the following outcomes to happen, solve the problem in the best way that you have with the tools you have, and here's what your assets are. Go do it. Is that fair?
Absolutely. And much broader than that, in fact. And so I may have, if I go in country and I do a certain job, then yes, maybe I get a left and right limit for certain aspects, certain projects that are TSSCI, that are top secret SCI. And I can do those if I choose to. But this is where, look, Art of War, Sun Tzu. Okay. I'm going to make this claim, and I'm sure I'm going to piss a lot of people off, but this is reality, man. War is the ultimate art. There is nothing that comes close to war, simply because war will engage your mind, your body, your spirit at a creative level that, with a medium that is unparalleled on the planet Earth. That's fact. And so when I look at a problem set like how do I flip Venezuela, it's actually easier than given problem sets that I've had in the past. Venezuela was not the hardest thing I've ever done, man. It was by far. A lot of it was given, some of it was given to me. In fact, I had to develop pieces of it, but large pieces, difficult pieces were given to me, which saved me time and resources. I still had to develop and build out other pieces of the Venezuela project. But again, there were operations that I had conducted in the past, which were far more intricate, far more dangerous, and had far less chances of success. When I looked at the Venezuelan problem set in and of itself, if the CIA, and let me put this bluntly, if the CIA and Venezuelan opposition government just fucked off and had nothing to do with it, Venezuela would be a free country. It had nothing to do with the fact that I had these forces and we were going to do special. That's all bullshit, man. That's all the show. Meanwhile, this is what's happening, right? And so what I'm doing is I'm building relationships with generals and powerful people that are close to Nicolas Maduro. I'm not saying in the government, I'm saying very close to this guy. And why? Why can I do that? Well, it's easy. Because These guys who are close to him, they're terrified they're going to get a JDAM on their heads when they're sleeping because they've seen us do it to the Iranians. They're afraid that they're going to end up on the wrong side when the U.S. does some kind of action in Venezuela. And so why would they work with me? Well, because they're fucking terrified, man. And so my job is to determine if they're green or if they're yellow. And that's the hard part. That's the science of it, right? That's what took me so long. And so I developed these connections over a year, and I had powerful connections. And so, to be honest,
are you doing that? You're doing that 100% in country. Did you move there? And if so, was there a cover?
So, I prefer not to talk about my methods.
Okay, that's fair. You're skirting things, so I might look. That's the agent in me asking, but
I am. I just don't want, like, I need to protect. There's a lot of people I have to protect. Right?
Okay,
because these guys,
give me let's get the broadest strokes, and I understand you're going to talk around some of the specifics of it. The broadest strokes of what that plan looked like, so we can kind of hone in on. There's going to be elements of it. What is it? If you were to give the elevator pitch, here's a note card. This is what we're going to do.
Main effort, powerful assets with task and maneuver units next to Maduro are going to encircle, envelop. We're going to at least try to detain. They are going to detain. I'm not going to do shit. Mm-hmm. That is their task and maneuver units. These guys are guys who have actual real units. That's main effort.
Okay.
That is main effort. Secondary effort. These guys here are going to make landfall, and they are going to conduct operations in and around, tactical operations. Is it a distraction for the main effort? Yeah, sure it is. Is it tactically viable? Yes, it is, as I planned it. As you'll later come to understand, it became less and less tactically viable once, the CIA decides to sabotage me or the operation by removing certain pieces that I needed. Now, we need to go back to the main effort because this is the important part. These guys are going to do the heavy lifting. They're the ones who are going to encircle Miraflores, and they're going to do what they're going to do. I'm not planning that for them. They know better than I. I'm never going to pretend. I'm never going to task. I'm never going to write, units op order for them. That's not going to happen. If I'm not on the ground, it's their country, it's their war. And so what I want to do is I want this done by Venezuelan hands. And I kept saying that to the guys I was talking to in DC, like basically my cutouts to the administration, like this needs to be done with Venezuelan hands. We don't care how bloody it is. Okay, great. I do. This needs to be done with Venezuelan hands. So that's that part of it. That's the most significant part of it. Now, why do these guys trust me? They trust me because I keep my word. I work with certain people. One of the big reasons they trust me is because of a general who they trust and who they believe or not fear. They trusted me because I was working with that guy. I didn't make inroads because of him. I did that other ways, but these individuals trusted me because I was working with General Cliver Alcala, right? And he's a controversial guy. Like he's now in jail because he, apparently he gave grenades to the FARC. And okay, cool. I did my research on him. He's a controversial guy. He's not well loved in Venezuela by the left or the right. My job is not politics. I don't care who likes who. I'm trying to facilitate the flip of a country, right? And so we were working together. And you could say he was the linchpin of my operation. So once the CIA, DEA, using the DEA to arrest him, once they do that under at the behest of the Venezuelan opposition government, because they're, too busy getting their USAID money or whatever, that really killed us. That was the final straw that killed us. But not only did it kill us, but it trapped us. I had men on the border and here's the other part. In order for these generals to trust me, I can't just call and say, hey man, go flip Venezuela. I'll be right here. I'll be hanging out. It doesn't work that way. I need to have skin in the game. Well, what is that skin in the game? So these boats, like the secondary effort, there was a tactical job that they had. There were 3 boats at the time. One of those boats was to make a link up. These other 2 boats were going to do this tactical operation. So the link up is essentially, okay, these generals send their guy, whoever it is, or maybe one of them is Brit. We have a face-to-face. Americans. Cool. It's just a link up. This mission was, the main effort is essentially a link up with a partner force, but really it was some of the strongest units in that, in Caracas, and that was it. These other, the secondary effort, obviously they're going to be working in and around, not even supporting the main effort, just working in and around to provide a little bit of distraction and chaos. So that was it, man. That was the plan, and we came really close up into the part where the Venezuelan opposition and the CIA, the guys from the very beginning of the story who were in the room, who are, oh, we're the CIA, we're going to help you flip your country, and the Venezuelan opposition guys who really wanted a free Venezuela, fair and free elections, they didn't want that, man. They just wanted money. It's all those 2 dudes wanted. George Betancourt, Lester Toledo. Oh, and, Lester Toledo, he's got a humanitarian aid company that was the beneficiary of the USAID stuff. So,
oh yeah, interesting.
Yeah, so this is how this ball, right? And so you have a group of people who are well-intentioned. I believe global governments was well-intentioned. I was well-intentioned. I truly wanted, this is something I wanted to do. The money and the money part always gets thrown at me, man. Well, it was all this money and great. But the reality is I did this because I looked in those guys' eyes in those camps, and these guys were soldiers. They had to leave their country because they participated in 30 April. And so they were exiles, I guess you could say, and General Cliver Alcala put them in camps and took care of them. And so that's kind of where we started. I started there, and when I went back to global governments, they weren't able to sign their business contract because they were there to help facilitate business and drum up business contracts for global governments and other individuals, their partner companies. It was very clear to me that these 2 individuals who were, emissaries or strategists or operatives of the Venezuelan opposition government under Guaido and Leopoldo Lopez, they were there for the money, man. They were there for the cash. And so when George Betancourt said something to me, he said, brother, we don't need these business guys, brother. We don't need these guys. I have tons of guys. We make all this money, brother. And I was like, okay, cool, man. And I kind of realized he was going to cut out global governments. That's precisely what happened. So when global governments gets cut out, I'm back in Florida, by the way. It took me a month to do my feasibility study. And during the feasibility study, I'm creating plans and tactical missions and all of these things. I went there under the cover of, I'm a documentary. We're going to make a documentary. Cool. And so we have all these things going, but really what I'm focused on, me personally, is making inroads inside Caracas, period. So anyways, I get back, global governments gets cut out. The Venezuelan opposition cease communications. I get stiffed for a lot of money, because I'm supposed to get paid out. I don't. Fine, I eat the money and I'm pissed off, man. I'm like, all right, forget this, forget Venezuela, whatever. The president of Venezuela sends his cousin or his brother or somebody, and this guy calls me and he says, hey man, we're serious. We're the serious Venezuelans. And right then I should have been like, dude, fuck off. You're a clown. But I said, all right, well, I'll meet with you. So I meet with this dude in a Dunkin' Donuts. I won't forget it. And, this guy's, please, brother, just go to this meeting, brother. Please, for the freedom of Venezuela. Like, okay, man, I'll meet with this dude. And so I go to Miami. I meet with this guy named, he's a strategist. He's an election strategist. He was the strategist for Santos. And Duque, but and this is going to come into play also, because what you have to realize is the cast of players in this entire scenario, whatever you want to call it, is executive branch people, man. Like, you've got the president of Colombia, who, when this was probably 3 weeks ago, I was on a radio, W radio in Colombia, and I'm talking about this guy, and he calls in, and I said that, yeah, he met with Lester Toledo and these other people. Well, this guy calls into the radio station, and he says, "Oh, President Duque's on the phone." I'm like, oh yeah, okay, cool. And he says you're lying about this, and that. I say, "Oh, I'm lying." Okay, perfect. This guy, he says that Ivan Duque has never met with Lester Toledo. I was like, "Really? That's interesting, because I've got photos of these guys on my phone that somebody sent me." And so I give this guy a photo of Lester Toledo and Ivan Duque, and it just, everybody in that studio's jaw dropped, hit the floor, man. It was just like, what? And obviously you'll have the controlled opposition guys and the media shills and whatnot that'll say, "Oh, it was photoshopped," and all this crap. Okay, man, like, if you want to try to convince me that, look, Lester Toledo is Nayib Bukele's strategist. He's his election strategist. This election just happened, like 3 months ago or whatever. Lester Toledo is a known quantity, man. He is a political strategist / operative. That's what he does. So anyways, these two guys want the money. They want all the money. I'm like, okay, whatever, man. I'm just trying to flip the country.
That's it. Just flip the country.
That's all I'm trying to do, man, is flip the country. Wasn't that hard? Wasn't that hard? Anyway, so I meet with this dude, and this dude is something out of a movie, man. He's something out of a Bond movie. He's got samurai swords and like samurai armor. I'm not kidding, dude. This guy's got a penthouse in Miami. And we sit down, and first thing I'm like, okay, man, like, I'll liberate your country, but I want a retainer. I want a personal guarantee from you. It was like the first couple of days, and we met several times. I don't know. I met with this guy on and off to develop this contract that had a SOFA status agreement. I mean, this contract was comprehensive. Anyways, so I'm negotiating with this guy now, and we negotiate on a price and whatever. But to be honest, the price, like, the retainer was 1.5, and I could do the operation for far less, I guess, but maybe it would be a little more. I don't know. So I figured 1.5 is fair, because I don't know what it's going to cost to get dudes, and I haven't fleshed out parts of this operation. All I know is I'm going to have to do a military style coup. So I meet with this guy, and we do the contract. He signs this promissory agreement for a lot of money. But the other part of the contract was for the later, parts of the operation. Because if you're going to flip a country, it's not enough that you flip it. You have to fight the counter coup, right? And then after the counter coup, then you have to bring about fair and free elections and humanitarian aid. So there's a lot of pieces to this, and I'm generalizing just to make it simple. But there's a lot that goes into it, and the plans were made a year in advance, those parts. But anyways, I agree. I say, okay, fine, I'll do this. And I continue to progress through the operation. Well, these guys keep withholding money, and like, it's really annoying, because, like, I'm not trying to fundraise to, flip your country. But really what they were doing, I think, is, when I read the discovery, these guys were nervous about a couple things. They were nervous about General Alcala, the guy who I was working with. They were really nervous that he was going to take power. He was like they viewed him as a political adversary, right? And so, whatever, man. I'm executing my mission and the contract, and I'm going through it. I'm finding, people to fund parts of the operation, and all in all, we get it ready to go. I bring a couple of my guys forward, because, I need guys on the ground who know what they're doing and whatnot. So we have camps inside Venezuela, or inside Colombia. There's a meeting that happens, and this is what the president of Colombia was basically lying about. we're in a meeting, and he shouldn't lie about this, man. Like, look, dude, if you're out there, you really shouldn't lie about this, because there's like secret recordings of this and shit, but you're going to do what you're going to do. So this guy basically says, listen, you're going to be able to use Colombia, and you're going to be able to have a logistic, or not a, but you're going to be able to move equipment through the country. You're going to be able to cross the border, and you're going to be able to have training camps, which this guy did. I mean, guys were training with camps in camps. There was no weapons or anything in the camps, but they were training. They were doing CQB and things of that nature, and they had a lot of time to do it. And so he says there's only one stipulation. You have to attack the ELN. And this is in a meeting with, I think there was probably 8 to 10 people in the meeting. And everybody, and now he had told me this previously in a private conversation, and I kind of like, all right, yeah, sounds good. Not doing that.
Who's the ELN?
Says, the ELN is the ELN's like the FARC. They operate in Colombia, and they do the same. They're a guerrilla organization.
Okay, I'm trying to remember what they stood for, but it's something Liberation Network or something like that.
Yeah. So the president of Colombia right now, he was one of their, he was one of their leadership, I guess you could say, one of their political leaders.
Got it.
So that's why I say, like, this thing reaches to the highest levels of government, man. Colombia, Venezuela, the United States. It's crazy. So anyways, I get through, and I'm like, okay, well, we're not doing that, but we don't have, maybe we'll throw a grenade over their fence or something. I don't know, and call it good. So the guys start training. We start, they start developing, whatever it is they're going to develop, whatever targets they choose to go after in country. Fine. I do have requests for the guys in Caracas, but the guys in Caracas are in Caracas. Like I'm very specific about my requests. These other individuals were working for a guy, and they were working for a dude named Sakea. And so that was the guy in charge, and the general. And I didn't, like, I'm not going to dictate your ops, man. Run your ops. And so as we fast forward and we get further down the chain, I'm sending, there's a Venezuelan guy who we have to get these guys gear at least. They have to look, Venezuelan/American. So uniforms, flags, bump helmets. So they look the part, and they can actually feel the part, and they can actually do what they're going to do. The Venezuelan guys were essentially, okay, we're going to handle the guns and stuff. Okay, cool. You guys handle that. They had asked me, on several occasions, hey, what about the guns? Now, I was building a lot of weapons inside, but this is for the later stages of the operation. So I had weapons for Americans who are getting, who would have, I guess, been the follow-on force. And this, again, was relayed to me in one of the meetings I had in DC, like, hey, listen, like, once this first part's, and this is one of the RFIs I had, once this first part's finished, I need to know that, like, I am going to have U.S. support, and that I'm going to have money flowing into my accounts, because this part's going to be the easy part. What comes next is the really hard part. So, I didn't ship any, like, neither me nor my co-defendant shipped anything cool. But Venezuelans were sending arms to the very final, I think to the very last camp, because these guys were essentially moving, right? So I had to get these guys from, oh God, I want to say it was some of the smaller cities into the northeast of the coast. And so to get them there took a lot of doing too. It took a lot of political maneuvering between different groups in the area. Now, when these guys get inside, and it was ELN territory, and this is one of the keys, right? These guys are now in ELN territory. And this is when, and not only that, but the Venezuelan opposition government was funding these guys. So through Sakea, Sakea didn't tell me that. Sakea, he told me later, but my operation was contingent on a few things. That was not one of them. They're getting funding from the Venezuelan opposition. Sounds good. We get to the camps. I get my guys to the very extent of where they need to go to launch on boats. Now the funding from the Venezuelan opposition starts. The Colombian intelligence service, who, if you remember from the very beginning of the story, was in the room with the CIA guy, the 2 CIA assets.
Mm-hmm.
Now you've got Colombian intelligence surveillance on the general, and this is where they're starting to really hone down. My guys are essentially, they're not trapped yet. My guys are in ELN territory, but they're not trapped. Once Ivan Duque comes out and criminalizes this, weapon seizure, that's when we're trapped. And then once Alcala is arrested by the DEA and the CIA, which was totally bonkers. Cliver Alcala was, he's a family guy. Yeah, whatever he did in his past, fine. He had already come to terms with it. He had a few hearings in the United States about it. And he ended up 12, it's probably more like 16 years now, going to live in Colombia with his family. He wasn't doing anything FARC related. He didn't go to prison for being a narco terrorist. There was no narco anything that was found, no evidence. And so I want to say he was aiding a guerrilla organization. Maybe that was a charge, I'm not sure. But the bottom line is it was incredibly suspicious to the nth degree, to the 100th degree, that they would just randomly put Cliver Alcala on the list. Well, what happened was the Venezuelan opposition government, like I said, was really nervous about General Alcala. And so they sanctioned him, put him on the wanted poster next to Maduro. And the other part is the CIA really needed to trap the guys on the coast. This ultimately trapped them in the coast once the Colombian intelligence service told the ELN that we were there to attack them. If you remember from the very first meeting, it was, you have to attack we'll give you these things, but we need you to attack these guys. Well, we're not there to attack those guys. We're just there to do our op. Long story short, the ELN now, and we're forwarding. So first comes a weapon seizure. That's a big hit. But to be honest, this is not
what
an armed.
country was that in? That was in Colombia?
This was in Colombia. And now remember, these guys, a lot of the weapons they would fall in on weapons once they got to Venezuela. And I know one of the dead guys, he acquired a lot of weapons in Colombia somehow, and had them pushed to the guys. But they didn't have, it wasn't like full, I think there were 50 guys. They didn't have 50 of anything. It was ragtag. So bottom line, we get to, now they're locked in, because now the ELN are hunting them. The Colombian intelligence service, the Colombian military are hunting these guys on the border of Venezuela, Colombia, on the coast. So they're blocked in by the ELN and these military forces, and they're on the coast. So this part gets a little tricky.
Let me try to summarize just to make sure I'm following you, because I want to make sure I am. Training camps are happening in Colombia. Weapon caches are being built up as well. Ragtag.
In Venezuela, right?
In Venezuela. Okay.
Yeah. Some when the guys progressed to the coast, they somehow got weapons to the coast. That I'm not sure.
Okay, because this is obviously happening not under your direct knowledge. You're influencing, but you're also observing at this point. You're not actually part of it.
Right. I'm not there for any of this. I'm not. Sure. Yeah.
But so you understood it, these camps, they eventually broke out of camps, may have picked up weapons at the last one as they crossed through the border. They've got weapons now. They have the weapons seized. And then these guys get basically backed up against a coastline, a military force, which sounds like it might be the Colombian military force. Is that what you're saying?
Colombians. And
Colombian
ELN.
military force. And then also this communist guerrilla fighter group that's coming out of the woods, the ELN. Right. And so they're kind of pincered in at least on 3 of 4 sides.
Exactly. So
okay. I'm trying to mentally kind of map these guys in. And so they're pinned. Do they have an out?
There is no out. So yes, they do. They have me. I'm their out.
Okay.
My boat is in Jamaica.
Okay. The out that they have would be you doing a maritime egress.
100%.
Okay.
Right. So this is the plan. Now that the operation is sabotaged. Okay. I have 2 Americans.
At what point, out of curiosity too, at what point did it go from, hey, we're conducting an operation to now we are in some sort of a hasty retreat, exfil, rescue mission for guys that are now, casualties or future casualties?
once they pull Alcala and they turn on, they essentially turn on the ELN and the Colombian intelligence. So probably around the point where it's, okay, they've confiscated these weapons. Now you all are criminalized. We're coming after you. So the ELN, it happened pretty much the same time, within maybe a few days or whatever. But that's when we know that's when I pull the plug, and I essentially, what was it, man? I call back to, once Alcala gets pulled, I call back to DC and I'm like, what are you guys doing, man? The guy there, my contact who's relaying, everything I need to know from the executive, is basically like, hey, listen, let me try to figure this out. Let me fix this. I'm like, perfect, because if you don't, and meanwhile, what's happening in Venezuela is these generals have just seen the linchpin of the operation get arrested by Americans. So they're freaking the fuck out. They're thinking to themselves, okay, well, we've been betrayed.
Because the DEA is the one that's involved in that arrest. Right.
So the U.S. has betrayed us, and we're all going to get fucking killed. That's what they're thinking. Men with families, you know what I mean?
Sure. So I do. I mean, these are people that are obviously from the way you've just described it, it sounds like they've got two opportunities. They can sit around and wait for the United States' disfavor to come in and drop a JDAM on them, or have a hit team come through and do a direct action and finish them. Exactly. Or they can be complicit in what sounds like it's coming from the United States. This is the interest that we have. We'd like to go ahead and help do this. And they can get on the right side. What would be the right side of history if they play ball?
Right. Exactly.
And now they're seeing that maybe they didn't read the room correctly because the DEA just took down one of the major pieces. So that's got to be terrifying.
Exactly. And for me too, it killed me. It killed us. That's when I realized that there was some serious fragmentation going on in Washington. Serious fragmentation at a political level that I didn't account for. Look, I'm a soldier. No matter who I'm in country with, I've worked with CIA and FBI, and we are fucking Americans. We don't stab each other in the backs. Well, here we go, because the next part of this is really crazy to me. So I get back. I have my boat in Jamaica, and I say to the guy who's with me, we're getting my boys the fuck out of there. Cool, roger that. Let's go. We sail, and we make it. Oh, and also, apparently there was CIA in Jamaica. As I read through some of the notes and some of the news and whatever.
Yeah, is that overtly described, or are you reading between the lines when you're reading the discovery?
There was a source who basically told some news, a couple news stations, a couple different sources that said there was CIA in Jamaica right before I left. And then what they said is that they came to me and said that you need to stop the operation. This shit never happened, man. Like, come on. Anyways, I digress. Was there CIA there? It's conjecture. I don't know. But the next part is a little strange to me. So I was pretty good at PMCSing the boat that I had. It was a good boat. It made the trip without problem. Kevlar lines. I mean, it was a ocean class type, fishing boat style. It, twin diesel engines, and I had replaced a lot of the parts. I had the engine service, all that shit, man. I did my due diligence. Anyways, the boat, I think 60 miles from where my destination, the border, boat breaks. One of the belts snaps. So, and I didn't think that, and there was conjecture 4 years later that maybe the CIA sabotaged it. I'm not sure if that's true. I don't know. But at this point, knowing what I know about the Gretchen, Weimer, and the J6, and it's not out of the realm of possibility now. I mean, it's an op. I mean, operating against Americans, I guess. I mean, the CIA does do that. They're not supposed to. So anyways, whatever happens, let's just say the boat breaks, happenstance. Boat breaks. Now I'm in the middle of the Caribbean Sea. My men are trapped 60 miles away. I can't get to them. And so I start to panic a little, man, because I know that these dudes are in trouble. I start making calls back. I obviously pop my EPIRB. I get picked up by this crazy huge tanker. Get back to the States. and I start working. It's COVID, by the way. It's full-blown COVID.
Yeah, what year is this? 2020?
This is 2020. This is April 2020 I get back. First week April 2020 I get back. And I'm greeted by who I would later come to know that they were well aware of this the entire time. I'm greeted by it's a Coast Guard, ATF, like law enforcement, U.S. law enforcement. So I don't think much of it. I come off the boat. I don't have anything, But the guy who's with me, he writes a sworn statement. There's nothing in the sworn statement. But anyways, he's a confident. He gets flipped in a day to be an FBI confidential informant against me. And so essentially the IC, and for anybody who doesn't know what the IC is the intelligence community. The intelligence community is comprised of, they have components of the FBI, CIA, DEA, special operations. I mean, it's any shop of any agency or government entity that communicates with other intelligence community folks, the IC. So the IC in general, they share information. FBI picks me up. I learned this later reading Discovery, or the Coast Guard. They write the report. That report is going up because what I learned later on is that my operation was tracked even in Southcom. The Southcom commander was tracking this operation. This report goes up all the way, man. CIA, State Department, National Security Council. This is up. This goes up. I haven't seen it yet because I'm sure it's classified and nobody wants me to read it because it's really going to fucking upset me. But But
you're saying that the military Southern Command was aware of what you were doing and they had updates on your op?
Yes. So I talked to a buddy of mine who I'm not gonna, but works with within the IC, and I don't want to talk too much about it, man, because
somebody in a position to know. Is that fair?
Yeah, somebody in a position to know.
That's how we talk around those things in the 302. That's how it looks. It's like a known source with reliable information and a position to know, or position to report on.
Somebody in position to know. He tells me straight up, man. This is obviously 4 years later. We were tracking it. So this was the fragmentation. You had people in government positions who were working against this op. And you had people who were working for it. Once it was sabotaged, I think what happened was the people who were working for it didn't realize that there was a counter op, that the CIA and these guys were working against this operation. They were really using it just for an opportunity to hurt the current administration. So, and listen, man, if you had told me this 4 years ago, I would say, come on, man, that's crazy. But the reality is, this is a reality. This is what we've seen over the last decade, man.
So my buddy George Hill talks about everybody assumes that the op they're on is the final end op, that the operation that you're given is the thing. And in order for you to carry it out, it has to look legit, it has to look real, and you have to believe that that's the mission that has to be accomplished. But if you're part of an op that is being driven, that is another, like you said, a counter op, if the real operation is doing something else, there's no reason you would know. That's what the compartment looks like. Nobody tells you, hey, by the way, your end has to look really good because the real mission is going to be accomplished by us doing this other thing. Then you're right. Well, nobody wants to be part of the charade, which is why I heard you earlier say your primary mission, your first movement was, surround and encircle, isolate your Venezuelan. But the distractionary device also has to have tactically accomplishable goals. It has to have things that can be done. Nobody wants to be told, hey, by the way, you're just you're a dog and pony show. You're a distraction. So just try to stay alive. Nobody wants that.
Exactly right. And that was a viable op, but like you said, an op within an op. And then you have the counter op.
And one more little piece there is my buddy George Hill, who worked a lot of time with NSA, did a lot of find, fix, finish stuff. He said, what you find in the CIA specifically, and the way that they run things, is that a lot of times an operation will start out with an all CIA memo or an email. It's like, hey, we're going to be doing this thing. This is a tasking we're going to be doing. And then somebody else is going to get a counter tasking. And then somebody else inside is going to get another counter tasking against that. And so you're sending these ops in counterclockwise versus clockwise until you get to the middle where the actual thing is going on, which is what they really want to do. And your belief is that the original idea was to make Trump look bad on Venezuela. Is
Absolutely.
that
100%. Everything that I've read in Discovery leads me to that conclusion simply because of the timing of the sabotage that this counter-op actually inserted, and the times, and when my men were in relation to when they actually dropped those bombs on us. The timing, when you look at it, it's not by chance. There's too many intricate things that happened. And so when I get to shore and I'm racking my brain trying to figure out how to get my guys, making calls to DC, which I get it. They basically stopped talking to me. Oh my God, we can't talk to this guy anymore. It was COVID. The FBI, again, these guys are now, there's a confidential informant who's like recording conversations that I'm having with him, and I trust this kid. And so I guess I could say what I would say about that part is the FBI knew full well that my men were in danger. The CIA knew full well my men were in danger. They knew I tried to get them. They knew I tried to abort the operation. But one of the reasons I know for a fact that these guys were running a counter-op is because they let it go. You know, there is a intelligence document. It's called ICD 191. ICD 191 basically says that if there's Americans in danger, that the IC has a duty to warn those Americans. Jamal Khashoggi, for instance. The American IC knew that there was an assassination attempt that was going to happen against Jamal Khashoggi, and it happened. And we didn't do the IC did nothing. They let it happen.
Right.
Now, okay, fine. If you want to justify that for politics, that's one thing, but it's entirely something else to justify a counter-op that is going to see Americans get captured. You know, I mean, it's unconscionable to somebody like me because I am a soldier, and like you because you're a airman, man. It's like we don't do that to each other, right? This game you play.
Well, and the other piece is, as you said earlier about the ethos, if they had told you like, hey, there's a possibility you're going to get wrapped up in this, you might get rolled up. That's just a disclosure that you go, okay, fine. Then you accept it or not, because you're a private contractor at this point.
Exactly. And so listen, like what I would have respected, and I would have known full well that these guys were there was something else going on other than an op. They would have just said to me, hey, listen, we know what's going on. Like, time out. Let's get your fucking men back. Let's get them back. I don't care if it was a CIA guy or an FBI. I don't care. How do we get your guys? You have to remember at that point too, man, there was a huge buildup in all the rhetoric and saber rattling. There was a destroyer group on its way steaming for Venezuela. And so we had boats in the area. It would be easy for a Coast Guard to divert to Colombia and say, hey, listen, pick these dudes up. Cool. Didn't happen, man. They let us burn, basically. Let my 2 Americans get captured. Anyways, fast forward 3 weeks. When I pick up the confidential informant, once I realize that I can't do anything other than move forward, if I go back E&Eing through the ELN, they get captured, they get killed, they get ransomed, they get killed. And I have been communicating with my guys inside, and I've kind of tempered a bit of their anxiety. So the op is now viable, although there's a lot of questions that I have. There's a lot of questions that my partners inside Venezuela have. Not a lot of trust for it. Obviously, I want to get my dudes out. I can't get a plane. I can't get anything to get my guys. I've talked to my men in the U.S. government. They are shutting me out. I call my boys on my sat phone. And how we looking, man? And these dudes essentially, they're Green Berets, man. You put the entire world against them, they're going to say, fuck it. Yeah, we can do this. But we have the conversation like, this is a dangerous place. Got to go forward. We go forward. And obviously what happens, happens.
Are they just in they're in evasion mode at that point? Are they running around through jungles, or what does that situation on the ground look like? Are they in an urban environment where they're doing urban hide, or what?
Yeah, so they're hiding behind tombstones, and they're trying to not get killed by ELN patrols and by, Colombian military patrols and things of that nature. And so they go forward. The boats launch. I think they're at sea for 18. And look, they were going against the water, against the wind, against the waves, beating into the waves for 18 plus hours to get to where they were going. When they got there, they would have been trashed. There were CIA assets in the boats giving up location. And I've learned this because I talked to one of the guys in the prison, and I was told as much. So the Venezuelan Coast Guard geolocates, kills the guys in the first boat. They shoot it at, whatever happens at the first boat, and then the second boat, the second boat makes landfall. They get on the land, and then they're E&Eing in Venezuela. So they get detained, and the rest is in the news, and that's kind of the story. Yeah. I did the best I could to get on the horn, to get into the media and misdirect the forces that were on the ground looking for them. I got on, whatever. I talked to any news outlet I could to try to misdirect the forces that were essentially hunting my guys in Venezuela. And then I released the contract of the actual operation I had with the legitimate government, so that if they were captured, they wouldn't be, summarily executed or whatever, which they weren't. They were captured. So, but it was really stressful. It was incredibly stressful, man. I've failed missions. Let me be clear, man. I failed missions, and I take responsibility for the guys who died. That was my op. I just never in a million years expected Americans to work against me. And well, you're naive. Look, man, I'm not. That's not supposed to happen. I have worked in theater in Afghanistan, in Iraq, with the CIA and FBI and other agencies. We never worked against each other. But in this instance, the CIA absolutely, they crushed us, man. And I'm only learning. The more I learn about it, I'm trying to get classified discovery. I'm trying to get all this stuff because they owe it to me. They owe it to the American people, the CIA and these agents who actually facilitated this, this counter op, I guess you could say. They owe it to the American people, man. It's unbelievable to me.
So let me take your story at face value. Some of the stuff, obviously, I can't substantiate, and I'm not saying you're not being honest. I just don't know. And so I'll just take it at face value for what it is. We're talking about setting up a coup to flip another government in Latin America. And the real op is sort of a coup against the competency of the sitting president, if I'm reading what you're saying correctly.
Exactly. Yeah, because if you think about it, let's say the sitting president gets a win in Venezuela. Well,
that's a big deal in 2020.
It's a big deal. It has implications politically, geopolitically through the region. And if you see what happened once this op happened, this op essentially changed our foreign policy in Venezuela, completely changed it. After this op went south, after it was sabotaged, our foreign policy was non-existent. And because of that, other countries in South America started becoming more socialist. Brazil, for instance, they flipped to, Colombia. The president is, he was a leader of the ELN. So a small operation like this has tremendous geopolitical ramifications. And in this instance,
and it sounds like it also makes it so that it's toxic to go out there and try to fix this problem. It's a flaming pile of crap, and anybody who touches it is going to come away stinking. So it basically gets us into the hands-off thing. I heard this interesting thing. See if I'm synthesizing this correctly. So check my math from what I heard you say. But the current CIA operations, you'd think that they'd be pro-America. But their definition of what's pro-America is different maybe than what yours are. And if theirs are, we are a globalist, colonial, a-hole power that sits out here and does a bunch of things that we shouldn't do because they believe in some sort of leftist mentality, then we have to stop meddling. And so you make it impossible for the United States to meddle because you have a burned op like this. And then the United States stays out of it. And the intended or unintended consequences is that it becomes a white space for the Chinese to come in and operate. And so that may be intended or unintended, but either way, it's the actual situation is that the Chinese now have a place to go and play. Am I picking up what you're throwing down?
That's 100. Roger that. That's 100%.
Yeah. And so that's not that unbelievable at this point. You're telling your story at a time when people are looking and going, holy shit, we gave $150 million to Norway so that Norway could give it to their pet project in Latin America or in Africa or wherever the hell they were sending their DEI monies. And what the hell does that have to do with America's interests? And if the interest is that America's a really bad, terrible, no good place, and the American government needs to mind their own business, and we're the CIA, and we're going to decide where we can or can't play, and if we can't, then we'll just make it intolerable for Americans to go there. We're going to make it politically untouchable. That's also an operation.
Yes, it's a strategic at the national strategic. It is an operation. You are 100% correct.
What's even crazier is a lot of the stuff that you're describing. I mean, it sounds like that movie Clear and Present Danger. Remember the movie with Harrison Ford?
Right.
And one of but look, one of the toughest things to do in that movie. I mean, in that character that was John. What was his name? John Clark, I think. He was the Willem Dafoe character. Mm-hmm. But his guys are pinned down. In that case, they're American special operators. They're a bunch of Rangers and Green Berets. And they're left to burn because the goal was not the goals changed and everybody packed up shop and nobody wants to take your call.
Exactly.
What's the FBI's move in this? What is their incentive in any of it?
The FBI, I think, just like you've seen, man. I mean, they're a member of the IC, right? So they are going to do what the IC tells them to do. That component of the FBI, that intelligence component, is going to do the political will of hire. And it all comes down to hire. Who's hire?
What were they coming after you with specifically?
Oh, the FBI in terms of arrest, in terms of indictments.
Yeah, so they've got a CI, they've got a CHS who's reporting on you and relaying your conversations. What are they trying to pin to you? And what are they? Obviously you've got classified discovery, so you're in a lawsuit. You've been indicted for what?
Yeah, they're trying to say that I shipped guns along with my co-defendant, allegedly, I guess. That's
so their argument is that you were illegally exporting weapons. So you're doing what? ITAR violations and
right,
okay.
Exactly. But if you look at I've seen some of the discovery on the Colombian side, and it's pretty wild, man. I don't know how bags change colors, but when there's I can talk to you offline about it, but it's pretty wild. It's pretty clear that if you've read the discovery that the prosecutors have, they know that neither my co-defendant or me, that we didn't ship anything and that it was a different entity. So
are they charging you under conspiracy or are they charging you with the specific act or both?
Both. Yeah.
So conspiracy. And do you know what the statutes are that they're doing? Is it counterproliferation specifically or ITAR specifically regarding the weapons?
I think it's ITAR.
So that's the international. I'm trying to remember what ITAR stands for, but it's something about it's a agreement against the transmission of certain technologies that are military and or dual use.
Right, arms trafficking, it's
an international arms trafficking, but it can be also like night vision goggles or equipment, or if you had some kind of a dual use chip that could be used to program a missile. I mean, the ITAR is pretty broad as far as what you can't ship, but it's an international regulation inside from the United States that we will not ship the following things. And so do they have guns and evidence that they claim that you shared?
Yeah, they've got evidence and things of that nature, but
now I remember you saying that you were building weapon systems. Where were you? Tell me what that was. Where was that and what were they?
Yeah, so that was basically ARs. That was in Florida. And that was basically so that when, like I was told in DC, man, yes, when, once this is done, money's going to flow. We're going to facilitate you getting everything to where it needs to go. But you have to realize I need American bodies on the ground in Venezuela. So I'm building weapons for Americans in my office and whatnot. So that stuff.
Yeah. And where did those go? Do they seize those or are those still hanging around or what?
So those, the chain of custody for this is pretty wonky. But that I don't know. I haven't seen any of them yet.
But they were seized. Somebody seized them.
Yes. Yeah, that stuff was seized. So,
okay.
Yeah.
All right. Interesting.
Yeah.
So what's status? So what's your status at this point? Like, what is the status of your case and your situation, and where do you see it going?
Hearings, and they tried to. It's pretty wild, man. What was it? Oh God, it was. So the lead prosecutor, the guy who built the case against me, it was 4.5 years later that I was actually indicted. But the guy who built the case was a prosecutor who stabbed a guy in Tampa.
I remember that. Yeah, he was doing a bunch of J6 cases too.
Yeah, right. So
he seemed like a real asshole.
He was, man. Yeah, so he ends up going to, his bail was $65K.
$65K?
Yeah. Did you see the video of it? It's
really yeah. Because he tried to claim it was self-defense, but he road raged. So for the audience's benefit, you could tell him the story. But I saw it, and I can validate what you say.
Yeah. So Patrick Scruggs, I mean, he stabbed this guy like 7 times. The video was insane when I saw it. Anyway, but he built the case.
Stabbed this guy through a car window, lest people misunderstand. This was an altercation that happened on a causeway bridge, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And he got out of his car, approached another vehicle through the open window, and then drew a pocket knife and stabbed a guy through the open window while standing outside the driver's side door. There's nothing defensive about any of this. This is a 100% offensive act.
Right.
I mean, because he's claiming self-defense, just so you know.
I saw, and he's never going to do any time. He's probably going to make a deal with the guy he stabbed and whatever. Anyways, this guy gets $65K bail. Mm-hmm. My bail is $2 million.
Perfect. That means you got to come up with what, $200,000 to bond out?
No, a friend put their house up.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So regardless, like their case is essentially, let's keep this guy in jail. He'll plead out. Easy day. So the entire team, it's like a team of 5 people. They're all prosecutors who've done the J6ers, and they did I think one of the guys, Jeremy Brown, and
they're on Jeremy Brown's case too.
They were his guys. Yeah, they were his prosecutors.
They also went after what is it? Adam? Is it Christian? I think it's Adam Christian.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, lectern leader who I met in Vegas, who's a super nice guy. So
there's a lot of these individuals this is not their first rodeo. They know what to do and they know how to do it. So we don't know that that's not a coincidence, but the more you work around intel community stuff and the way things work, you become less likely to believe coincidences. Is that your experience too? Yeah, I mean, to be honest, the head of the lead FBI agent was the Russia collusion hoax. She helped build that. Now I'm very looking forward to talking to you about that offline as well. I have some vendettas about the way that they handle a lot of this stuff because the credibility sink is significant and it's really dangerous for the country to do that. Right. Let's talk about betrayal. It seems to be universal in the people I talk to that have gone on the wrong side of the government after serving. Did you retire from the military or did you separate before? I retired. So you have did you lose your retirement? No. Okay, not yet. If they convicted you, they would take it. Is that right? Probably so, yeah. And you have VA benefits, I imagine, as well? Yeah. Yep, VA benefits. Yep. And they go after those as well. We've talked to 2 people in the last couple of days here that have had that taken away from political type prosecutions. What is the attitude since the inauguration of Donald Trump? First of all, what is your attitude about it? And then have you seen any change in the DOJ? Yeah, man. I mean, there's a lot of hope. Unfortunately, I don't. It's hard to tell. There's a lot of holdouts. The Middle District of Florida is strange. Obviously, I spend all of my money on legal now. So I noticed the change, which is it's a big fight, man. Like I don't know how anybody can fight 5 prosecutors and the ungodly amount, the unlimited budget of the the DOJ, but I'm hoping, I watch Twitter and, a lot of people are getting fired at the DOJ. So,
So
fingers crossed.
if the Trump DOJ was interested, they could drop prosecution with prejudice and dismiss those indictments, correct?
I think so. I mean, you would probably be better to ask.
That's my understanding of what could happen. So with the right attitude, because you're still in the pre-trial things, and do you have a trial date that's been set in the future?
No, I've been told this is going to take a long time because there's a lot of discovery. I mean,
and the classified discovery makes it much more complicated.
It does. And I think they're going to try to hide it, man, to be honest. I think they're going to try to cover it up,
So you're a mission-oriented guy. Your task and purpose. We're sitting here talking on a podcast. What is the task that you're attempting to accomplish as you go out there and you start talking to folks, and maybe tell me about some of the resistance you found?
Yeah, I need to fight the counter narrative because it was well crafted, well curated. I mean, the narrative against me, it's unbelievable. If you type my name on, it's like I'm this crazy mercenary who let his guys get caught, and which is absolute nonsense, but it exists. And so I have to do my due diligence. I realize that if this goes to trial, I'm at a tremendous disadvantage because everybody watches the internet, and before I even step in there, I'm going to be the lunatic who got his friends captured in Venezuela and got a bunch of people killed. And so I think it's important that Americans know the truth. For me, it's huge. Americans need to know the truth about this. And the truth is, a brave group of Venezuelans and a couple Americans, were sabotaged by their own governments, people and bad actors in their government and bad actors in Venezuelan government. They need to know that so that future mistakes aren't made. I mean, if you look at the problem right now that we're having in Venezuela, who does Donald Trump trust? What does he do? What does he do? Does he trust the opposition? How can he trust the opposition with what happened with us? Does he, so what it is he's forced to work with the devil he knows, which is Maduro. But at least he knows that Maduro is a proper villain. He knows that. He expects it. You don't expect the opposition government to conspire with the CIA to make you look bad. And I've got I have a piece of discovery. It's a secret audio that I made for one of my guys to take of one of the Venezuelan opposition. And it's one of these guys essentially trashing President Trump. We don't trust Donald Trump. We only work with the CIA. And it's okay. You can see it from the beginning, how this was set up and the coordination between the Venezuelan opposition and the CIA, and it's well documented in the discovery that I have right now. So,
if somebody told you this story 5 years ago, and got your background, how would it hit you?
I wouldn't have believed it, man. No way.
What are the most unbelievable parts?
The fact that Americans were Americans in government were betraying Americans trying to do a good thing. Just for politics to attack a president, it's unthinkable to me. The other part is it's unthinkable to me that there's a reason why ICD 191 exists. It exists to protect Americans. The fact that the FBI knew at a minimum, and the entire IC knew, and nobody reached out to me to try to help my guys. That to me is unthinkable. I mean, look, when I went down range, I hunted terrorists, and guys, like, we lost guys, and I've led men, and I failed missions, and guys die, and that's hard, dude. That's hard to take. It's really tough. But I don't we don't betray Americans. That's our ethos. This whole notion that somehow it's okay, or it's CIA, that's what they do. No, fuck that. That's not okay. Fuck that, man. Americans need agencies that are not autonomous, that have accountability, that have left and right limits, that protect Americans. They don't, have Americans get captured and have other people working with them get killed. That's not the intent, man. That is, I don't know. It's unfathomable to me, and a lot of it took me a lot of reading to get to this place, to realize that there are some really diabolical individuals in the U.S. government, and I hope they all get fired. I hope they go to trial. I hope my intent of this is eventually that some of these people behind the scenes, behind the curtain, actually have to go to trial themselves, to be accountable for what they did in this situation. So that's my hope. That's what I'm trying to get done.
One of the things that you said in our first DM interactions was that you've reached out to Green Berets that have podcasts to tell the story, and there's not an interest in it. What do you attribute that to?
Well, Mike did. Mike, to his credit, man, he's dealing with some stuff right now.
This is Mike Glover?
Yeah, he did.
Okay.
But he's dealing with some stuff.
He most certainly is, sure.
Yeah, and you know what? I mean, people go through things, man. Like the way you know who your real friends are is when everything comes crashing down. The people around you are the people who are your friends, and that's it. I think that people are scared, Kyle. I think that this is, like you said before, this whole scenario has been, this entire scenario has been absolutely used in the media as a way to stop or discourage anybody from dealing with Venezuela or other countries of this nature that we could actually have a hand in, with, geopolitically, for instance. But this operation was so bad and it was sabotaged to be as such. And so Americans don't want anything to do with it, to include service members, and I get that. I understand, but hopefully when you hear the truth of it and, the more truth gets put out and the more, discovery that gets put on the table, hopefully people will really realize that the last 10 years, very strange. And the last 4, hopefully it's an anomaly that we never come back to, because it's incredibly dangerous to have an intelligence community that works against Americans.
Yeah, you're speaking my language for sure. You mentioned, Jesus being the most badass creature that's walked the earth. Are you a Christian, and is that a prominent part of your life? If so,
that's everything, man. I follow Christ. I mean, I don't know that I don't feel real comfortable in churches because a lot of the lingo and stuff, I don't understand it. But to be perfectly honest, I mean, that's more than you and I are talking right now, more than I'm sitting in this room. That's the truth of all things. So, absolutely.
Do you see a through line in this experience as you look backwards? Do you see like reason or rationality, or is it still too close maybe to see like a bigger plan as you see Doge and the election and Americans kind of having maybe a sympathy that they wouldn't have had a couple of years ago for what you're going through? Do you see any of that now, or are you too close to it, do you think?
I do. No, I absolutely do. I just, you got to manage your hopes. You know what I mean? You got to manage.
For sure.
There's a great line in, oh God, what is it? It's a Denzel, Ethan Hawke movie. Training Day.
Is it Training Day? Oh, it's a good one.
You got to manage your smiles and cries. So I try not to get too hopeful, but I've got great people fighting for me.
Yeah.
I have, there was a documentary that was made about this event, and this woman, she's an incredible woman, and she continues to push forward and try to get the truth out about this. And I don't want to, she has big news on that, and I'm not going to talk about it. There's another guy, Lance, I'm going to butcher his name, Lance Migliacci at the Big Mig show. He had
I know Lance.
Talk stuff. He's awesome, man. But there are dudes who, and it's not the people I thought would ever help me with this. And this film producer, she's a latte liberal, man. Like, I would never in a million years think that she would ever take up my side, but she has, and now I think she's a little more apolitical, and she's more of a centrist, as I think a lot of people are becoming. Because let's be honest, President Trump, this guy, he's not the card-carrying Republican. He is just a man with common sense.
Yeah, he's not a conservative, and people might get upset about that, but he's just not. He's a liberal. He's a liberal from 20 or 30 years ago, which is how you end up with a film producer who just stayed still believes the same thing she did in 1995, and suddenly now that makes you a right winger.
Right.
It says a lot.
Yeah, it's strange times, my friend.
Very. Your story sounds like a wild Hollywood movie that would have like a Ben Affleck character in it and a lot of intrigue. You know what I mean? Or there'd be maybe a Matt Damon working this. I mean, there's all of the pieces of it, right? I mean, you got all the elements that we've seen in a major blockbuster, and at the same time, like when you live through it, it probably doesn't feel very awesome or exciting. It probably just feels horrifically crazy.
It's not fun, man. Like, it is not fun. But the silver lining is this: had I not been arrested and been going through this would never come to light. Nobody would see the discovery. This would have been covered up and forgotten. And now that the discovery is on the table and there's classified information, it's on, and the people who are now in charge of these agencies, they care about stuff like this. It's a big deal. They have been attacked the same way I have. All the J6ers, this entire community of guys who's been attacked and jailed. So you asked me before, do I think it's a good thing? Absolutely. And this guy, everything he does, like, is perfect to perfection and is perfectly orchestrated, and there's no fighting him. So yeah, here we are.
It's a really wild tale, and I appreciate you sharing it, and I'm going to have to just probably digest more of it, and maybe if you have a good update or if no update at all and you just want to come back and just talk shop, I'd be happy to have it. I share my phone number with you so we can talk offline, and I'd be interested in hearing more. But are you looking for support if people want to hear more about the story, if they want to look into it and they don't want to hear a headline that says crazy mercenary does crazy thing that makes no sense? You're obviously not, you're not some half-baked kook, which is, I think, as much as anything else, that's what I wanted people to take away. The story seemed really disingenuous, having known Green Berets.
I'm pretty consistent on my Wonderlic scores, and I'm pretty consistent in my personality profiles, and I score really high on, I do, and I'm pretty boring. I'm just at the end of the day, man, I'm a pretty boring guy. Like, I didn't go to war for the adrenaline rush, and my parents are incredible, and I had an incredible childhood, and I was never looking for. I was asked to do something by people who were speaking for the highest level, which I respect that, and I'm a soldier. I go where I'm told, and I fight, and that's what I tried to do. Didn't turn out the way I wanted. Didn't anticipate the pushback from other Americans. So, yeah.
You have at least a presence on social media. Is that something you'd like people to follow, or is that help your campaign?
No, absolutely, man. That would be great to have a bigger presence. I wish I had a bigger one. I have never really worked too hard at it until now. But it's a challenge to try to grow it, right? I mean,
it is. We'll work on that a little bit. Tell people what the handle is and what platform, and if I have an ability to boost it, I will.
Yeah, it's Jordan G. Goudreau, and it's Twitter.
Twitter's the biggest one. Yeah, X, Twitter X. All right, so I'll put the link in the show description so folks can follow that. And you'll have some people interact. I think your story's fascinating at the very end of it. And I think if nothing else, the headline contrasted with the person that sat and talked to me today is not the story. When you first pitched it, I went like, oh yeah, I vaguely remember that. That sounded crazy. And of course, there's always more to it. The human being behind the story is always the real story.
Well, honestly, man, I really appreciate you having the courage to have me on. And it takes a lot of courage to really talk through this topic. So thank you, Kyle. I really appreciate it.
It is my pleasure. It's the easiest thing of it. And let's do an offline connect about some FBI people and see what kind of weird stuff's going on. Let's see if we can connect some dots for you that might be interesting. I know they listen to this sometimes, so screw them too.
Cool.
And that is the Sunday sit down. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Interesting story, right? Let me know what you thought. That's going to be something I'm very curious to see. What did you think? Because it took me a couple days to kind of process this one. So I'll be curious to see what your input is. If you guys want to hit us up, make sure you can do it over on Rumble. It's rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin, youtube.com/@Kyle Seraphin, or you can find us on X @Kyle Seraphin. Leave a comment there. If you want these things early, you can sign up as a subscriber over at KyleSeraphin.com. That is the locals community. And if you're sick of seeing pop-up ads after the fact, you can always go to Spotify where you get both audio and video. And you can get there by going to KyleSeraphinShow.com. Links are in the show description, as well as the link for our sponsor of the day. Thanks for joining us. These are fun for me to do. They take a little bit of extra work, and I don't mind taking on a guest who, one, might have a controversial story, or two, doesn't have perfect audio and video. We don't need professional guests. We just want regular people who want to tell us interesting stories and how they became a headline, or why people might know who they are, or maybe it's something you've never heard of before. So we do all of those things here at the Kyle Seraphin Show. Thanks for being part of the community, because you guys allow it to be the case. It continues on because you've demanded it, and that's what I'm here to do. I like having these chats. It's fun to sit down. All right. I'm just about done with the move from one studio to the other, so I look forward to seeing you guys again at 0930 Eastern Time. That is 8:30 in Texas, America, for the Kyle Seraphin Show. Regular weekday shows. Join us there for the live chat over on Rumble. Join us over on YouTube if you like. We look forward to seeing you again. I hope you have a great rest of your weekend. Otherwise, if you're listening during the week, have a great week. God bless you. Let's talk soon.
Thank you for listening to the Kyle Seraphin Show, streamed live weekdays on rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. Follow Kyle on Twitter, Truth Social, and Instagram @Kyle Seraphin.